to enhance that entire section of the Lawson Way Trail, which will make it much nicer than it currently does, as you're all aware. The extent of our meetings have continued. We met with them on February 2nd to determine in detail what other aspects that we can bring to the Lawson Way Trail, specifically with respect to concerns that were asked about safety. And in order to address the safety concerns, there's a number of different things we've done. Number one is there'll be a portion of parking, a 42-space parking lot at the corner of Regent and Lexington that'll be dedicated for Lawson Way use. Let me emphasize, there is no other spot along the 40 miles of Lawson Way Trail that will ultimately be developed that is any way dedicated to Lawson Way use. Norwood would be the only place that would have an area that's dedicated for Lawson Way parking. To the extent that there would be safe access from that parking onto the Lawson Way Trail in Regent. If you look at tabs 3 and tabs 4, they show the 42-space parking lot, as well as the enhancements that will be made if you look at tab 5, with respect to the improvements that will be made, which will be a second bike repair station, bike rack, resting area with benches, and a dog watering area that would be added to that spot as well. The point being that not only would just the neighbors in the immediate area or within a short distance of Lawson Way be able to get safe access to it, but neighbors all over Norwood would be able to drive there. They wouldn't have to park on Lexington. They wouldn't have to park on Regent. They would be able to they'd be able to go into off-street parking at no expense and go ahead and access the Lawson Way Trail. The other aspect of safety that we confirmed with the Lawson Way Board was that as soon as the bike trails expanded and Xavier finishes their portion of the extension, the City of Cincinnati will be installing a traffic light at the corner of Montgomery and the bike trail. It'll be similar to the traffic light that you see over on Madison Road, which is a full traffic signal, where the Lawson Way Trail crosses Madison near Rookwood Pavilion. The final issue we dealt with in terms of just trying to confirm safety and those aspects is just give me a second. Was with respect to addressing the traffic congestion and confirming that because we're just moving one dealership 200 meters down the road to another dealership, it is not adding to traffic congestion on Montgomery Road. It's not going to increase what is currently created. This is beyond the other safety issues that are being implemented to go ahead and protect use of the Lawson Way Trail. One of the final issues they raised with respect to concerns of the community was residents living along Lexington Avenue are concerned about lighting on the proposed dealership property. The lighting should not be an annoyance to the residents. The current plans and the lighting inserted in the current plans will generate 0 foot candles beyond the property line along Lexington Avenue. And within the property itself, the foot candles will reduce to 1/2 on the property itself after closing each night. So there would be no disturbance to the parties on Lexington with respect to any lighting issues. Subsequent to that, we did meet with the Economic Development Committee. They did ask about possibilities of moving the building forward closer to Montgomery Road. Pursuant to that request, we did work with the architect to try and come up with several different plans to see if that would be possible. And unfortunately, it's not economically feasible to get that done based upon the current structure. So we did look into that issue. My point being, the Josephs have bent over backwards to try and be an excellent corporate partner for the city of Norwood. They want to work with the community. They want this to be a positive enhancement for the community. We believe it will be a positive enhancement for the community and with respect to the use of the Lawson Way Trail. Accordingly, we've asked that you go ahead and approve modification of the ordinance and approval of the PUD plan that's been submitted. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Braden?
Oh, thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you coming tonight, sir, and laying out that for us.
Point of order. Point of order. I don't think we do questions during public hearings, do we?
Generally not.
Generally not? Okay, fine.
So we can come back with questions.
Come back.
Yeah, once the hearing starts.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor? Please come forward. Then we'll move on.
Oh, I think he is.
Good evening. My name is Richard Joseph. I do represent the Joseph family for this dealership. First of all, thank you all for your time tonight. Appreciate all the work you put into it. Just wanted to say, as Mr. Saba just stated, we're merely trying to move the dealership from one location to another. We're not adding a dealership to an existing area. We're moving it from the corner of Montgomery and Clenay, and we'd like to move it to up the street on Montgomery across from Stones Lanes. Really, I just want to make that point that it's not an added dealership, and we're trying to, it should be, end up as two improved properties. I would imagine the existing property would be improved in some way consistent with the area around it. I don't know anything, but I just would assume that Xavier may want that to improve it, similar to what's there now. If so, I imagine that would be a beautiful structure. We're trying to take what is a rather dated business facility and create a newer one just up the street that should be rather beautiful with, as Mr. Saba stated, quite a bit of beautification around it along Montgomery and along the bike path. Other than that, I just really wanted to say hello, appreciate your time, and if you have any questions, I guess we'll get to that later. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak in favor? Then we'll move on to those that would like to speak against it. Please come forward, state your name and address, and your comments at the podium.
I was asked to go first, so I don't know. So anyway, I am the co-founder of the Wasson Way. And I just want to assure Norwood that the Wasson Way is very committed to working with Norwood and making this a successful project. We have been committed from day one. 7 years ago, I held a public meeting at the Williams School. And prior to that, I spent days handing out 1,000 leaflets all over Norwood. We had 60 people show up at the meeting. It was a great meeting. Bridget Kelly was there, and about 60 other people. So we've always been committed to Norwood, and we will continue to be committed to Norwood. Second point I'd like to make is this is a gold mine. It's a gold mine for Norwood. It's a gold mine for the Josephs. As I've said previously, we're estimating a $50 million increase in property values in Norwood. Norwood is the neighborhood that will be most impacted by the Wasson Way. 60% of the houses along the Wasson Way are here in Norwood. 60%. The Wasson Way goes through 9 different neighborhoods, and 60% of the houses are in Norwood. Huge impact. I'd like to also say it's a gold mine for the Josephs. They've made millions of dollars so far on their $3 million investment. Every piece of property along the Wasson Way in Hyde Park is sold. There was just a piece of property, 28,000 square feet, sold for $1.2 million. If you do the math, that means that the Joseph property is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $8 million. So everybody comes out ahead. Finally, I just want to say that we are interested in working with Norwood in the future. I will also I'll tell you a little secret. a very famous family from Norwood was making a huge contribution to the Wasson Way. So I think not only is me that is committed to Norwood, but a lot of other people are committed to making this happen. Thank you.
Get your name, sir?
Jay Andrus.
Thank you. Who would like to come forward next?
Hi, I'm Jessica Moore, and I'm at 2432 Hudson. I own a multifamily with my husband, John, and I have used the trail as a nanny. I use it with my husband. I use it with my friends. I will use it with the baby. We plan on being here a long time, and I do not want a car dealership on the bike trail. I want something I can use. I will never buy a car from that car dealership. But what I would do is meet friends for a meal, stop for ice cream, get a gift, maybe visit a friend if they lived there. There is just so many other great things that could go in that space, especially because in Norwood we lack third spaces. We also only have one park in Ward 2, and it is a drainage pit. So having Wasson Way has allowed me and my friends throughout COVID to take snowy walks together, or to take kids to ride their bikes. I want someplace that me and my family and my friends can use. Even if I wasn't mad that Joseph is trying to put this car dealership here when there are other places. I'm not mad they're trying to move across the street. That is not the thing. This space is for the community, and I think you guys will see tonight that the community wants something else there. I'm not opposed to Joseph being in Norwood. We have lots of other vacant areas for them to participate in. And after watching them at the hearing talk about we are only in the car dealership business, that's just wrong. They are in the business of making money and in real estate. So they can have another spot in Norwood. We will help find them another spot. That is not a problem. But I want someplace I can hang out and spend money and spend time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. Who would like to come up next?
Hi, my name is Mary Speed. I'm at 2000 Lexington Avenue, and so fairly impacted by the what's going on here tonight. I am a recent resident of Norwood. My husband and I just moved here last year after a couple years of rehabbing a house on Lexington, so we have invested quite a bit. What drew us, or what piqued our interest in coming to Norwood, was the Wasson Way Trail and the idea of being able to walk or bike to many different amenities in the area. The other thing that drew us here is the increasing property values, as Jay had mentioned, with the bike trail coming in and nationally studies of increased property values in proximity. We saw that happening, so we saw a bright future there. Also, walking around the neighborhood, you all know this, Norwood's a beautiful city. The character of the homes just is very, it's a very pleasurable place. I take walks back in there as well as Wasson Way, and what you see throughout the neighborhood is people improving their properties. My concern, and I strongly oppose the changing of the zoning on Lexington Avenue for a car sales lot for several reasons. I think it will negatively impact property values, especially on Lexington, but also the streets going backwards. So we put a wonderful thing in with Wasson Way, and this is going to detract on that. You know, I can imagine that we talked about maybe not the bright lights, but, you know, I envision bright lights, a lot of cars. I didn't hear anything about landscaping on the Lexington side. I heard Montgomery and Wasson Way, but it's not, you know, it's a residential street, and to have it completely lined by a car lot is not going to feel very residential anymore. I'm sure there's going to be trucks in, unloading, reloading cars. So it just is not a fit in a residential area, and I would think it would give pause to anybody who is looking at future improvements to the property on Lexington Avenue and the streets nearby. I think it would give them pause as to whether to do that, and you know, we could see some deterioration potentially in those properties. So I think there are a lot better alternative uses for the space. And if you think about this being the gateway into Norwood from the south, and the impression of those externally coming in to Norwood, we've had a lot of, we could piggyback on the investment in Wasson Way and University Station at Xavier, piggyback on that and really create a great space. How many spaces, empty spaces, do we have like this? Someone coming into Norwood to really make an impression for our city. So, you know, some of the things, and I had sent an email to a number of members. I was playing around with PowerPoint and saying, hey, this is what we could potentially envision, but put some multi-use businesses up towards Montgomery Road, things that might cater to people on the bike trail. That is busy all the time. I can see it out my front door. You know, fitness shops, things of that nature, a restaurant, sandwich shops, outdoor eatery area that people could come to. A middle space, it could be a green space because we have a lack of those in Norwood, and you could have events, a farmer's market, or you could have a beginning of a 5K run there. You know, you could see this being a real community area, and then maybe put some single-family homes down towards Regent. So really revitalize the whole area. I think it could help revitalize other businesses along Montgomery Road too. If you're attracting, this becomes a destination for people to go. So I think a developer could probably, you know, working with a developer could probably come up with a lot better plans than what I sketched out on my little PowerPoint. That's something really exciting for Norwood. I think there's a lot of wins for individuals like me. My property value goes up. For the city, you get more in property tax from me. You think about the businesses, I think you get from new businesses that are there, you're going to get income from them. I think surrounding businesses will do more business, you'll get income from them. Just in terms of amenities for residents, having the green space, quality of life for all the residents, and I just don't believe a car lot is going to, you know, have all of those opportunities, and I don't believe it belongs on a residential street, and I frankly don't, you know, all we've invested, I don't look forward to having a car lot as the other side, on the other side of the street. Like I said, Lexington Avenue being a residential street. So I thank you all for your time and letting me share my thoughts.
Thank you.
I'll go next because mine's super similar to Mary's, and I live on the other side of School Outfitters. So Alicia Locke, 3738 Spencer Avenue. That's just a block away from the site. I first want to say I am not at all in opposition to the Volkswagen dealership in our city. I've lived down the street from it, from their current location, our whole time living here, and have no hard feelings. Right now it's a little bit up from entering our city. It's a little more tucked away. And it's near the well-lit area of Xavier, so it's not directly affecting those houses. I find it to be, even though it's a block away, a very different location that they're wanting to move to. I'm here because of the huge potential that the site in question has for our city. As other people have said, the lot is right at the south entrance of Norwood. It's on our main thoroughfare, across the street from the shops at Xavier, with all of their students and all of their visitors who come for the school. It's along the bike trail, a bike trail that is already a huge and appreciated asset to Norwood residents. My family, as the others out here, are on the trail regularly. Our two toddlers have learned to ride their bikes on the trail. We push the baby on the stroller. It's a safe place to be able to get away. And as somebody else said, we don't have many green spaces. Our park is a little difficult to get to in Ward 2. And the Wasson Way has just been absolutely amazing, and it is always full of other walkers and bikers, no matter the weather. We've enjoyed watching the bike trail develop, the mural being put up so that it looks pretty, and seeing how houses and businesses are already responding to it. Existing Cincinnati businesses along Dana, they have their storefronts already facing the other way because that's the way that it was developed at the time. But they are clearly working on ways to increase interaction with passersby on the trail. Dana Gardens has an entrance now. They're trying to do that. But they have to do it retroactively. Several of the Lexington Avenue houses, like Mary's, have undergone impressive major improvements, and I believe that's because of the correlation to the trail coming to our area. It's amazing to see the change in just a summer that that's done. those houses don't want to be facing a 24/7 well-lit car lot, even if it's not directly coming into the light coming into their homes. It's visible from their homes. We have these grand windows that face out to the streets with our big front porches that will be visible. Also, I've heard it's unlikely there'll be any kind of a walkthrough through a car dealership because of the cars moving. It makes sense, but that is effectively going to just cut them off, those Lexington houses, from being able to use the bike trail. Also, and then of course the increased traffic that we've talked about. And then pedestrians using the trail will not see a car dealership as a pedestrian destination to go to as they're on their weekend walks and rides. And they're not going to be drawn to our business district by it. You're going to see a car dealership and you're not going to say, I wonder what's on the other side, a nice Italian joint? Probably not. You're probably going to keep going past Xavier where it looks beautiful and go on to other places. You all, listening to, I think it was the last meeting, are speaking very favorably about the Montgomery Road Revitalization Plan. Rightly so. It's amazing. But the plans for this dealership don't really work with the principles of that. And as has been addressed, their hands are tied with the way that that curb cutout is and the fact that it needs to be set off. It doesn't go with the principles we know make a desirable, walkable business district, which we know that's increasingly what families and residents want in areas. And so I, along with others, are concerned with that traffic flow issue. With Xavier and the bike path already there, yes, Wasson Way will probably put the light in as Madison Road, but it will be increased to have traffic going to that area. It's also my understanding that the Joseph family does a great job with managing properties in other areas and other uses. So I think it's a really cool potential for all of us to be able to profit from this. I think if we could work with them to develop a use for that property that would be both profitable for them and advantageous to our city and the residents. I haven't heard that that's not possible, so I just would like to hear that explored a little bit more. That property with its prime pedestrian location, easily accessible to residents, students, and trail users, it could be a destination that puts us on the map as a place to ride and walk to. That would then bring more customers to the rest of the Norwood Business District, like Betta's, the Future Barbecue Joint, Cappy's, and even further down the road. As we make those improvements that make Montgomery Road walkable, that's going to help everything. The city put these ordinances in place to protect that lot for appropriate use, and I hope that you will continue to uphold the ordinances and that all of us, you and the Joseph family, can work to find a solution that will be mutually beneficial for all involved. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the conversations that you've been having. I really appreciated the dialogue following this. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak that is in opposition?
Hello, thank you for listening to me. My name is Jeannie Stanton, and I live at 4022 Burwood. I'd like to focus on some key points in Wasson Way's mission and in their vision. They talk about a beautiful, sustainable urban greenway trail. They talk about a trail that creates a vibrant hub of community activity. And I personally feel that a huge lot of cars built along that Wasson Way would not really focus on that, and also in the residential area, and it would not add the type of green space of the Wasson Way mission. I think it would be an eyesore. I believe that this huge structure being lit 24/7, and I do appreciate the fact that it will be dimmed at night, would also be inherently wrong for Norwood's part of this Greenway Trail and those who live within eyesight of it. And I think it would hinder the enhancement of this trail that this trail provides for our neighborhoods, mine included. And I love the idea of alternative uses. People have talked about how much this, the value of this property is. So I don't think that Joseph Toyota would lose out in anything if they would actually invest in it in a way that would be better off for our community. And I'd love to see restaurants, shopping, ice cream, parks, all of that. And I have no problem with them being in the city of Norwood, but I feel like there would be definitely a better location for them to choose. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak?
Hello, my name's Candace Winterbauer. I live on Slane Avenue. I want to thank you all for your time and for making this a wonderful place to live. My family and I love Norwood. So just a few points to kind of hit on with some of the things that we've heard today. The first one is, in making any decision, I really like to put myself in someone else's shoes. So if my big thing, and some of you might know this about me, I love trees. I worked a lot with Wasson Way. I'm putting the trees in along the trail. I'm putting micro parks in throughout Norwood to really diminish those hot zones that we can have in the middle of summer. You know, we want to make Norwood a pedestrian-friendly place. We want to be able to walk down the street. If you get hot, have a seat somewhere, get some shade. So middle of July, if you're either commuting, riding your bike, you're walking with your family, you're walking up to Xavier to get some graders or whatnot, just imagine walking by that car dealership. You have at least 3 acres of blacktop. It's humid. It could be 95, 100 degrees. It's going to be hot. And then also just the traffic on Montgomery Road. So Wasson Way's been working on trying to plant as many trees as we can along that path to diminish that hot zone that can happen. So that's kind of my first point there, is really trying to imagine it being better, having areas where you can sit and relax, get some shade, and so on. Second, I'm very grateful for the Josephs on the changes they made, working with Norwood together. I think that is showing promise. I would like to say, as a representative for Protect Our Trail, we walk the streets. We put flyers at every single house in Ward 2 along Wasson Way. We went to Ward 1. We talked to residents. People came out, just, you know, we're just trying to make it aware. Hey, this is what's going on along the trail. What's your interest? If it's for or against, that's fine. We're just trying to increase awareness. So we got a lot of the residents' opinions. You guys can see that in the handouts tonight, kind of the comments that we saw, that we received on our website. And the majority of the people that we talked to, which was a good amount, are not a fan of that car lot being moved next to the Wasson Way. I would love to look at other opportunities. You know, what is the economic impact of Joseph Auto? How much money do we get as a city from them? You know, weighing that out. Is it, let's keep them here? I'm all about keeping them here, but I think Norwood might have better places that would be better for the community and better for them as a car lot, not next to a bike trail. So a lot of effort has obviously been put into that design. You know, they met VW standards. The design's gorgeous. I mean, it looks great. It would, again, just, I think, be so much beneficial being somewhere else. In Norwood, definitely. But what about Norwood standards? We have ordinances for a reason. They met VW's, but they didn't meet Norwood's. So that's just kind of telling me something there, like, let's work together. If you're spending so much time and so much money in meeting VW standards, why didn't they come to us and work through those ordinances? Like, hey, I know you guys are trying to increase the pedestrian friendliness of Montgomery Road. You know, the curb appeal, not having vehicles enter and exit on Montgomery Road. I really like that design plan that was set to help improve that small business or just business alone, and having families and pedestrians being able to walk up and down Montgomery Road and be comfortable and feel safe. So those are my points for tonight. Again, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for all you guys do.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cameron Jones. I live on Ellesmere Avenue, the most southern block that dead ends into the Wasson Way Trail, so I have great access to it, which is awesome. I'm excited by the level of activity on the trail I see on a daily basis. I use it now, and in general, I would love to have more places within walking distance to patronize. This area is so well suited for pedestrians and people-oriented uses. As has been said tonight already, for many people entering Norwood, this is going to be their first impression. Based on what I've seen of the plan so far, the building will be set back significantly from the road to make room for display of vehicles, and the majority of the site is fronted by parking. The parking setbacks are not met in many areas. There's also an additional setback requirement on Lexington Avenue that's not being met. That's put in place, I assume, to help protect the residences on Lexington Avenue. The current plan goes against good site design practice in this dense neighborhood, especially on such highly visible and important frontage where buildings should hug the road that they front. The vast majority of the north and south elevations are blank walls or dock doors or service doors facing out to residents and to Wasson Way trails. There's not much about this site that aesthetically or functionally engages with its neighbors the way a site like this has the potential to. This makes sense because it's a car dealership, which is why it also makes sense that it would not be permitted here. This plan is inharmonious and incompatible with the residences to the north and the commercial uses to the west. It does not conform to the character of the surrounding area. It does not appear these plans meet the criteria used to evaluate changes or waivers to plan unit developments. There are some who believe this is the best or the only thing that we can get. I disagree. I've heard negative comments about the quality of housing along Lexington, and that anything going on this lot would be better than what is there now. Placing a dealership directly across from residences, some of which have been remodeled and increased in value, may negatively impact their value and deter current and future residential investment in this area in a way that other commercial uses or other types of uses may not. Volkswagen belongs somewhere, but it isn't this location. This is simply not the right place, and the zoning affirms it. Council has the chance now to hold on to all the positive momentum occurring along the Wasson Way. I urge you to protect the vision that was set forth when the zoning of this property was established, and vote no on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Susan Hoover of 3827 Spencer Avenue. I'll be very brief. I'm going to reiterate a lot of what was already been said. Wasson Way is such a special project, and while I really appreciate everything that Joseph is trying to do, they simply can't create what I think most of the residents are looking for, which is walkability, mixed-use spaces, community spaces. I think there are many other locations that they could move to within the city, and Wasson Way really, I believe, should be protected to, again, keep the momentum of some of these really exciting things that are happening in the city. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak?
Good evening. Thank you all for having me. My name is John Moore. I live at 2432 Hudson Avenue. I'm going to try to maybe bring a few new items to the conversation tonight. As some of you know, I'm fairly involved in listening to the Economic Development Committee meeting. There were a couple of things that kind of piqued my interest that I want to revisit tonight. So one of those things was with regards to Mr. Tepe saying this is the only business that the Josephs are in. And as we've heard several times tonight, we talked about the Joseph family and representation of the Joseph family. If you come through the auditor's site and look at different entities that are owned by the Josephs that all point back to the same address, Pond Realty Dana, Joseph Realty, Columbia Development Corporation, within a 10-mile radius or a 10-minute drive of this building, the Josephs own a 20,000 square foot residential building. They own vacant commercial land. They own a 29-story skyscraper downtown with commercial tenants. So to hear that this is, out of their wheelhouse, we're only in the car business, to me, that feels untruthful and makes me wonder what other kinds of things might be not entire truths that we're hearing from Mr. Tepe and the representation. Another thing that caught my attention is this notion of a 2-for-1. Norwood, you're going to get a 2-for-1. The lot where Joseph currently is, and then plus the Wasson Way development. What's interesting about that, though, is that looking into the current lot, which as best I can tell is owned by the GM of Joseph Volkswagen, so it's not like it's real at a distance. This is somebody intimately involved with the business. They currently own 2 acres right there. If you include the houses that are adjacent there, the existing lot, and it immediately is adjacent to a 13-acre parking lot owned by Xavier. And you look at it and you think, okay, couldn't they have 10% in that, 1.3 acres of that 13, that would get them to the same footprint that they have at this proposed Wasson Way location. And what's interesting is looking at this particular parcel and some of the connections to Xavier. As you may know, one of the Joseph brothers is on the board of trustees at Xavier. As I've talked to different people, namely at the Montgomery Road corridor plan, there were some planners from the county, and we were talking about this intersection. And I asked them, and I said, what do you think about what's going on here? First thing out of their mouth, I really hear that Xavier wants that lot on the corner, the current Joseph Volkswagen. In that vein, immediately after buying that property from a family member in 2018, shortly after they bought this property, they went to the Board of Revisions and asked to pay double the taxes. They asked for a double the increase. Why would you do that? Well, if you were getting ready to donate it to Xavier, who reportedly once has a parking lot for University Station. So I find that kind of an interesting in this 2-for-1 sort of conversation. Another comment that was made was from Mr. Gabbard, the chair of the subcommittee, who said, we'd love to see Surrey Square redeveloped. We'd love to see it brought closer to Montgomery, have it more walkable, less auto-oriented. And I think that's fundamentally what we're talking about here tonight, is what kind of businesses do we want to prioritize in the city, and where do we want to prioritize them? Pedestrians in the area, or residents in the area, are really hungry for walkable businesses. They're hungry for third spaces. They use the trail. The vast majority of residents use the trail at least once a month. And when I think about this decision to go more pedestrian friendly or go more auto oriented, I think about sort of where in Cincinnati these different contrasts exist. So if you look at places out like Kings, that's sort of a classic, or Westchester, car dealerships works because those are newer areas. Those are car-oriented areas. Norwood is an old city. Norwood was built before the mass adoption of cars. This was meant to be a walkable city. That's why we have so many little corner stores. And so in thinking about, where do a lot of car lots exist and how do those municipalities fare? I looked. You can look on the library has a research portal. And in looking at every single car dealership in Hamilton County, I looked at the places that have the most car dealerships. Number 1 is Colerain. They've got 24 new and used auto businesses in that zip code. The Josephs have a number of them. If you look at Colerain property values, they're 19% below the Hamilton County average. The next place that has the most auto businesses, Carthage. Their property value is 41% the Hamilton County average below. The next, Lockland, 11% below the county average. The next, Montgomery. Oh, Montgomery, John, you just disproved yourself. They're actually double the average property value. But if you think about Montgomery, they're not really comparable to Norwood. They've had a master plan every year for 20 years now. That's not where we are. We're more similar to these other near-in... Hey, Miles. Milo agrees. Going down the list, you've got Mount Healthy, 20% below Hamilton County average property value. Delhi, Winton Place, Price Hill, Roselawn, West End. Those are places that have chosen to prioritize auto-oriented businesses, and if you've been to a lot of those, I don't think you would count those as places that Norwood is aspiring to be more like and to model their development pattern after. And I think that going back to Surrey Square, around that time, a lot of the decisions on Montgomery Road were made for auto-oriented, and I think, to Mr. Gabbard's point, we wish we could have a do-over on some of that. Tonight is our chance to get it right in the first place. And then just the last thing that I'll call out here is the threat of spread. If you look at some of the other Joseph properties out at the perimeters of the outer belt, they're talking about 3.3 acres now, but what else could that look like? One of the Joseph brothers owns a lot immediately south of Wasson Way on Dana. Are they going to extend over there and have people coming back and forth over the trail to access the car lot? I know that they've approached business owners on the Stone, Bettas, Cappy's corner about buying their businesses and extending to that side. You know, what happens at that point? Are we prepared to allow for those kinds of changes should Joseph continue to spread? And so, you know, I'm all for figuring out how to help the Josephs make money. Obviously, they own that property, but I also think that they do have other models that could make money other ways. Our city could benefit from putting them in more of the car-oriented areas of the city and not on the most pedestrian-friendly gold mine, as Mr. Andrews called it, down there on the south end. So I would ask you all to not approve the change. I would ask you all to try to figure out other options for where they could go, or try to work with them and a developer on building something that could be exciting for residents along the Wasson Way there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Anyone else?
Good evening, thank you. My name is Will DeLuca, 2446 Indian Mound. As you all well know, I have several properties in this area. I agree with a lot with what everyone has just said. I don't want to reiterate it, but they're right on point. What I want to talk about is something a little bit different, and that is what I know is going through all your guys' mind, is litigation and the fear of litigation. You know, you can sue a ham sandwich. You really can. And I had this conversation with someone yesterday. In life, there are some things fighting for, and in life there's some things you just want to try to get the best you can. This is something worth fighting for. You just heard a lot of residents in this area talk about what this means to their lives, their families. And I couldn't agree more. I'm business oriented. I very much support the Josephs Group. I bought a car from those folks. I'd like to see them stay in Norwood. I'd like to see something worked out with the Josephs. I think there's possibilities within the city of Norwood that allows them to accomplish what they need to accomplish. I understand what constraints they're within. I know that Volkswagen headquarters, I know what they're offering, and I know what they want them to do. There's other areas of Norwood, they have options. And I also believe that they could take this parcel of land and they could develop it. And they could turn it into this magnificent area that it already is, even more so. But what I don't want to see, and what will happen, mark my word, is that if we allow this to happen, we're going to become a pass-by. Look what Blue Ash is doing. Go out to Summit Park. I beg and plead with you folks. Go out to the city of Love and look what they've done with their bike trail. You know, I'm in a business where it depends on bringing bodies to my establishment, bringing people to the city of Norwood. You don't do that by putting a dealership there. You do that by bringing people, giving them a reason to say, you know what, let's hop on that trail, let's walk down there, let's check out these shops, let's check out this maybe brewery or a specialty beer store or an Italian restaurant or whatnot. But I think we're at a point here, and I've heard this said here once before, that, you know, we've all driven down the street of Norwood and said, you know, and looked at something and said, how in the world did that happen? We have an opportunity right now to make sure something like that doesn't happen. We truly do. And I implore you folks, you know, I'm not saying no to no. There's other areas of where the Josephs could go build their dealership. You know, I look at the Zumbiel site on Harris Avenue, sitting right there on the highway. Tens of thousands of cars drive by. You want to talk about high visibility to market your brand? There you go. It's not going to affect any houses down there. It's not going to do anything. You know, it is poised for this type of development. You know, surely that land will get developed. And I hope it gets developed in a meaningful, responsible way that it should. So with that, I thank you. You folks have a nice evening, and I implore you, just, you know, and just so you folks are aware, when that change did happen, I knew about it. And as a property owner, as if I were to ever sell that's something that I would disclose to any potential buyer. There's a phrase called, I don't know if you guys ever watched The Brady Bunch, caveat emptor. Now, I didn't go to Duke Law School, I didn't go to Yale, I didn't go to these famous colleges, none of this stuff. But by golly, I have enough common sense to know if I'm going to make a $2.8 million investment, I'm going to know exactly what I can and cannot do. And just because I have a letter from the mayor that says that, hey, he supports this thing, that's not how things work. We're a 3-branch government here. It's this body right here, not a mayor, that makes that decision. So, give him back. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Anyone else?
Well. Woo, it's a good thing I don't have a problem being the bad guy. We only had 2 categories, for and against. So I guess mine is a third. Oh, I'm sorry, some of you may not know me. I'm Pastor Sonny James at 1830 Hopkins Avenue. Stop by sometime, get a burrito. Guys, I just want to say how ashamed I am. I want every resident that's watching, anybody that's watching on television, pull your children away from the TV. Don't record this and let them hear it at a later time. Norwood, Ohio. All I can say is here we go again. Some of the most intelligent people in this room. Very smart. They love their city. They love their community. But do we not understand, no matter, I'm not standing here, I don't want people that listen to me to say, well, he said this for the Josephs, or he said this for the Norwood residents. I want to talk about our children. I want to talk about the integrity and the character that we continue not to display. Listen. A little boy comes down that ramp right now and gets pushed down by a bully. The way we operate in Norwood is we pick up the little kid and say, well, just go home and take a shower, get you a honey bun, you'll be all right. But the way I grew up is you go over to that person that's been violated, that's been hurt and abused. And the first thing you say to that child is, my God, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Now, whether the Josephs did everything right or not, all of us intelligent people, all of us God-fearing, loving people, when do we turn to somebody and say, my God, you did everything that you thought or you were told to do. Hey, I just want to say I'm so sorry. Now, the city may decide to do something different because people may choose to do something that they believe is in the best interest of our city moving forward. But how can we talk about moving forward when our history, our reputation is about hurting people that don't agree with what our status quo says? I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed. Before you say whether you're for or against something, look at the person that's been violated. Stop your own agendas and reach down and say, on behalf of my community, I sincerely, genuinely apologize, and I'm so sorry that we gave you false information I'm so sorry that happened to you. And when we talk about, well, it's just a profit center for them, let's kick it all the way real. Norwood, does it make a difference if they're here for a profit center or all of us? It's about money. So be honest. But let us stop talking about things that we say matter to us, and we never say, I'm sorry. Oh, of course, some of us will wait till the cameras go off and we'll try to run down privately and say, oh, by the way, I'm sorry. Guys, I'm not saying you should be for or against this move. What I'm saying, Norwood, Ohio, let's get some character. Let's show our children that the code of our conduct has to be elevated. I'm not against our Norwood groups. I'm not. But what I am against is when we continue to perpetuate status quo. Before you all vote, whatever you're going to vote, have the decency to just look at somebody, and we have to thank God that they haven't already. They're just nice guys, I guess. As brothers I know, just for the sake of it. We'd already be in court spending money, win, lose, or draw. You want to treat me like that? Okay. Why not just turn to them and just say, hey, whatever happens, I'm sorry about your experience. I'm sorry about how we continue to act like boneheads and not at least acknowledge somebody. As I look at them, they don't have the color of my skin. But you know what? I bet they feel like I feel. And what do we do as a community? We gather together and we perpetuate our agendas, and we don't have the decency to just say publicly, we made a mistake, we did something wrong. We should not have done that way. And just say, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Respect. So, what I want to say is, what residents that are listening, I don't hide behind anybody, and I don't hide behind a group. There's something I have to say, I'll bring it to your doorstep. Let's show more character. Whatever side we're on as a city, let's just first, before we take care of city business, let's take care of one another. And as a black man, I can honestly say, I know what it's like to have people not care about the pain and the things that we try to do right and still be cut out. Let's have a heart, guys, please. I love this community. We are moving in a more progressive area in a lot of areas. But the one area we still stink in is humanity. You're not elected officials, you're human beings. Please, whatever your vote is, before your vote, show our children that you have a heart for people. And they'll believe that one day you'll have a heart for them. God bless.
Anyone else that'd like to speak? If not, then I hereby close this public hearing. Are there any questions by council? Mr. Tracy?
I've got a few questions. I don't know how many anybody else has, but I'll go one at a time here. Let everybody ask questions, I guess. Can we bring the gentleman up that was that first spoke for the Joseph group? Some of my questions are kind of devil's advocate on for and against the project, I guess. And this kind of comes back to something that we did in 2020 with another business in that similar area. So I guess the first question I'll ask you is, will there be any jobs added to this business? Meaning, are you going to be hiring additional salespeople, additional clerks, additional anything other than what is there currently?
I think we indicated in the original application there would be an increase, Richard, roughly 10 to 15% of the number of employees, correct?
That would be the plan, that's correct.
The landscaping, I guess, along Montgomery Road, how have you looked into how that's going to affect any car sales as far as visibility from the street? Meaning, I know a lot of car sales or car dealerships are far close to the street, and that's how they make a lot of sales as somebody passes by and sees, hey, I want that car, let's go in and look. Is the landscaping along Montgomery Road going to affect that?
Well, that's what we looked into the design that we've provided that is under tab 3. So to try and meet the standards of Volkswagen and still provide adequate landscaping and a buffer between the dealership and Montgomery.
Yeah, I looked at that. It just didn't seem like there was enough there for me to actually make a judgment as to whether or not that was going to affect the visibility of the dealership itself from the street.
And I think we were the goal was to try and achieve a sort of a happy medium, for lack of a better term, both that would satisfy the dealership and yet still create a buffer between the street. So I think to that extent, that's what we've been able to achieve with that design.
Okay. Is there a structure currently on that site that you are going to utilize as kind of a base point or a starting point for your structure that you're looking to build? Or are you building a whole brand new structure from the ground up?
It's a whole brand new structure. All that's left there is an old building that's part of the old train depot.
Okay, so it would be possible to maybe move it towards Montgomery a little bit then?
No, the problem we ran into is trying to fit it with the design and the VW parameters and trying to move it forward. That's where we couldn't do that. And then to sit with the other setbacks.
Okay. When did you purchase this property? Was it 2017?
2017.
Okay. Would there be an opportunity to take that parking lot that you had mentioned and possibly turn that into a green space versus a parking lot? Or is that a multi-use parking lot for yourself and the trail itself?
Currently, the school outfitters uses that, but I think that, we'd be up to discussing additional space. The reason we came up with the parking issue was addressing the safety concerns that some of the representatives of the community expressed, and in talking with the representatives of the Wasson Way Board and the president of the board in terms of this is a big concern for people elsewhere on the Wasson Way Trail, that neighbors who live immediately adjacent to it are concerned that people are going to park on their street and take up parking spaces on their street in order to get access to the trail. So that's where we came in with the idea of allowing that to be for other residents of Norwood who want to bring their kids over and get off at a spot that's close to the Wasson Way Trail. They could park there, there'd be a little bike repair, a bike rack, so they could readily access the Wasson Way Trail without having to wind their way through the city of Norwood to get there. So that was the idea behind it. I don't think we're necessarily opposed to that idea, but that's where that thought process.
Any other questions? Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Salma.
Thank you.
Can we do that?
Sorry, Eric.
And Mr. Moore, we want to move these, we can move these ordinances up?
Yeah, we can,
Let's go amend the agenda
Yeah.
and move them forward.
I can make a motion to amend the agenda and put the Finance Committee meeting report at the very end.
I think you want
No,
to do
it's one-
L1, L2, and L3.
L1, 2, and 3.
The report. Yeah, I can make it, yeah.
Either way, I mean, as you said, I think I overheard you say they don't really care about the report. That's fine.
We can move so your motion is move L1, 2, and 3 right after the public hearing before H.
Well, after H.
After H.
Oh, yeah, no, actually, you're right.
Before.
Yeah, I forgot what
Now, like now.
Right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Geraci?
Second.
Second by Mr. Geraci. Mrs. Williams, will you call the roll?
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, so we'll move L1, L2, and L3 up to now. Prior to doing that, we had one resident that wanted an email read, and forgive me, I had it laying right here. Mrs. Williams, would you please read that?
Email dated March 8th, 2021, from Jessica Sinefro. I have a prior engagement and I'm unable to attend the meeting, so I wish to send this letter to be read in lieu of addressing council in person. Dear Norwood City Council, my name is Jessica Sinefro, and my husband Nathan and I live in Ward 2, just down the block from Mr. DiNardo, with our 6 children. We have lived in Norwood for 8 years and have seen much change. We have been so proud to see the ways Norwood is becoming more beautiful, including the Williams Avenue Community Garden and the annual planting of trees, both of which our family happily volunteers with. Our family also loves to walk, run, and bike on Wasson Way multiple times a week. With regards to the Wasson Way parcel in question that VW is interested in, I ask the council to consider an alternate use of that space. Why is the massive parking lot right next to the dealership that sits largely unused with literally hundreds of parking spots and acres of paved ground not a sufficient option? To pave more surfaces next to Norwood section of a scenic bike trail in order for cars to be parked is a poor option environmentally, recreationally, and aesthetically. Both the paved lot and the cars will radiate heat and make Norwood stretch of Wasson Way an unadulterated eyesore. That is not the kind of reputation that Norwood wants to perpetuate, and it is not what is best for her citizens. Please consider my family and my children in your decision. I would much rather have my children look out on something more imaginative, cultured, and dare I say it, beautiful. I bear no ill will to Mr. Joseph, and in fact, the Joseph family attends the same church we do, and they have been most generous there. So I also beseech the Josephs to consider what is best for Norwood and find other places to expand their business, which is indeed of great value to our city. Finally, while my voice is calling out for an alternative location, such as the vast adjacent Norwood Plaza parking lot, if council decides against this, and approves a Wasson Way location as a parking lot, can we not ask the Josephs to sponsor a border between their lot and the bike trail? Not just a few shrubs and trees, but a healthy and substantial natural border to abate the eyesore of a parking lot next to a scenic bike trail. Also, in the spirit of generosity, the Josephs could partner with school outfitters for sponsorship of a playground that was rumored to be installed between Wasson Way and school outfitters. Council members, if you must agree to this poor use of the space, please at least be bold in asking for concessions. Thank you for your time and your service to our community. Most sincerely, Jessica Sinefro, 3958 Ellesmere.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. We have to receive and file Can I have a motion to receive and file, Mr. DiNardo? Motion by Mr. DiNardo. Can I have a second? Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bosa?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Dracy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item L1.
Mr. Miracle. I'm really sorry to everybody. Can I go get my computer fast? I forgot to bring it. I need to get my computer back. Sorry.
Take a short recess.
We'll take a short recess.
We got a vote on it.
Wait. Apologies.
All right. Okay, we're back. Moving on to item L1, introductory reading of ordinances, resolutions. Ordinance amending ordinance number 28-2014 to remove the prohibited uses stated in section 2B, automotive service and repair, and section 2H, sale of new motor vehicles in ordinance 2814, as to the 3.35 acre assemblage of real property located at the southwest corner of Montgomery Road and Lexington Avenue, including real property identified on the Hamilton County Auditor's records as parcels Montgomery Road 651-0054-130 and 131, 3732 Montgomery Road 651-0057-0053 and 0054, Montgomery Road 651-0054-132, and a portion of parcel 651-0057-0055, 0056, 0057, 0058, 0060, 0061, 0062, 0063, 0064, 0065, 0066, 0067, and 0068. Mr. Tracy.
I'll make a motion to have all three readings.
We have a motion, Mr. Geraci, to have all three readings. May I have a second? Mr. Kelch?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Question through the chair to the law department. If he could just give us a synopsis, since we have such a crowd here, as to what this particular ordinance is more or less saying.
It's an unusual PUD situation. The PUD ordinance that was passed when a PUD was placed, when this was placed under a PUD kind of zoning, included a list of uses that would not be allowed, which is unusual. And in order to allow this, one of those uses that's not allowed under the current ordinance is auto sales and repair. And so this ordinance would amend the ordinance that put the PUD on to take off the restriction on auto sales. So it would basically allow auto sales on that lot. That's what this one would do. The next two deal with the plan, because under a PUD, the owner has to submit a property use plan. Here's where the buildings are going to be. Here's the materials that are going to be used. Here's a traffic plan. Here's what the signage is going to be in the landscape, and all those kinds of things in the PUD plan. That's a separate issue than the zoning, whether or not the underlying use is allowed. So the first one is whether or not council is going to allow automobile sales on that lot. And then the next two are about whether council wants to approve the plan as submitted with the site and here's the parking, here's the landscaping, here's the building placement, here's the materials, here's the lighting, or whether council wants to approve that plan or wants to reject that plan. But this one is about whether or not passing this would allow auto sales on those parcels.
Mr. Leonardo.
Yeah, it's just a discussion point. I originally came in tonight thinking I was going to motion for a single reading, but I like the way that you worded that. It might be in council's best interest to actually have all three readings tonight on the first element so that we can know as a council how we want to proceed for the other ones, because I think that actually that's quite useful, and so I'm going to be supportive of having all three readings tonight, which I wasn't originally going to intend to do.
Mr. Tracy.
I'd like to see this go through just so that we can get to discussion on the other two, because some of the questions, some of the statements I have aren't really going to matter if we don't get to the next two.
Yeah, that's well said.
Meaning, if this fails, then there's no reason for us to even go on to the next two, because we can't approve plans that can't go on that PUD anyway. So the only thing we're doing with this is just kind of saying, yeah, we're going to allow this within this PUD. We're not giving them permission at this point to do anything.
Mr. Briggs.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, question for Mr. Moore. I appreciate your, I'm having a hard time hearing, so just cliff notes. Again, please reiterate exactly, because there's a lot on stake here. Reiterate exactly what we're doing here on each of these. One more time, please.
Okay. The first one, do you want to allow auto sales on that site? The next two are about, do you like the plan that they have submitted?
Anyone else? Any other questions? The motion on the floor by Mr. Geraci, second by Mr. Kelch, to suspend the rules and have all three readings. Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings?
Sorry, guys, I need to read that big old pile today. Ordinance, amending ordinance number 28-14 to remove the prohibited uses stated in section 2B, automotive service and repair, and section 2H, sale of new motor vehicles in ordinance 28-2014. As to the 3.35 acre assemblage of real property located at the southeast corner of Montgomery Road and Lexington Avenue, including real property identified on the Hamilton County Auditor's records as parcels Montgomery Road, 651-54-130 and 131, 3732 Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 57, 53, and 54, Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 132, and a portion of parcel 651, 57, 55, 56, 57, 58, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68. Ordinance, amending ordinance number 28-2014 to remove the prohibited uses stated in Section 2B, automotive service and repair, and Section 2H, sale of new motor vehicles in Ordinance 28-2014. As to the 3.35 acre assemblage of real property located at the southeast corner of Montgomery Road and Lexington Avenue, including real property identified on the Hamilton County Auditor's records as parcels Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 130, and 131. 3732 Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 57, 53, and 54. Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 132. And a portion of parcel number 651, 57, 55, 56, 57, 58, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68. Ordinance, amending ordinance number 28-2014 to remove the prohibited uses stated in Section 2B, automotive service and repair, and Section 2H, sale of new motor vehicles in Ordinance 28-2014. As to the 3.35 acre assembly of real property located at the southeast corner Montgomery Road and Lexington Avenue, including real property identified on the Hamilton County Auditor's records as parcels Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 130, and 131, 3732 Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 57, 53, and 54, Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 132, and a portion of parcel number 651, 57-55. 56, 57, 58, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams.
I think the mics were off. You'll have to read that.
What's your pleasure, gentlemen? Mr. Dracy?
Make a motion to pass.
Motion by Mr. Dracy. Pass the ordinance. Mr. Braden?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Mr. Bonzo?
Thank you, Mr. President. We've had like a lot of discussion about this in the Economic Development Committee. I attended the Planning Commission meeting on this, and I've just got to say that we have an ordinance that's already in place that prohibits automotive service and sales. I would like us to stick by the ordinance that we have. I think the residents have made it, many residents that were here today have made it very clear kind of where they stand, and I agree with many of the points that they made. I think it's going to be in the city's best interest long-term to do everything we can to promote, kind of make our gateways attractive and welcoming. And any changes to the place that's there now is going to do that. And so I don't think it has to be an automotive dealership. So I just recommend that we would turn this down. I think there's so much more potential that can go there. I also am very curious to hear, I'm curious why there can't be more expansion at their current site, especially with some of the points that John Moore made regarding the GM kind of owning the property, and regarding the close relationship with Xavier to potentially acquire some of the property along Montgomery Road to make a bigger site there. With that, I'm going to vote no on this, and I definitely urge the rest of us to do the same.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo. Mr. DiNardo?
Yeah. Because the ward I represent is so directly impacted by the potential passing or prohibition of this ordinance, I think it's worth me kind of going through a very brief, kind of paint a picture, storyboard of my thought process from kind of the end of the summer to today. And I originally kind of went through, I'm speaking to the audience because most of them are here, originally went through a position of a company bought a piece of land. What am I going to stand, why would I stand in the way of that? Similar to arguments that you heard me make on 2 occasions in January and March of this year. I think that in addition to that, throughout the past 5 or 6 months, I have been incredibly worried about threat or, more importantly, the consequence of litigation. I'm feeling, though, that the worst case scenario is not much different than what the Josephs would do if they moved into the property and built up. Barring our ability, we would lose the ability to, I guess, negotiate, hold our cards, work better. It doesn't appear to me that there would be a financial either penalty or damages. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say that. I'm just going through a thought process with y'all. Because that was priority number, position number 1, 2, 3, and 5, that drove almost all of my thought process through all this. All the conversations that so many of the residents have had with me about alternative positions, what we should do about that, I've let you kind of lead that charge because I think it's really good thought process, really good logic. I've just tried to kind of focus directly on why was this ordinance put in place? We heard someone say it's a bit strange, and it is. It's a really strange ordinance to be so specific on what it is, but what's important is that it existed. And unfortunately, it existed before, for the Josephs, it existed before they bought the property. I heard another resident talk about how, they were told information that either wasn't true or I would say that people weren't in a position to be making. And that really puts a dark or black eye on kind of our look. I don't like that. It sits more heavy on me than I think it does with a lot of you. But be it as it may, the ordinance does exist. And so at the end of the day, my position is we should uphold the language of the ordinance, not necessarily because of what it means for our future, but because there's not enough reason and there's not enough negative consequences for us not to. So that's my take.
Thank you, Mr. Bernardo. Mr. Tracy.
I know there's been a lot of talk as far as the Norwood Plaza area and the current location that they're in. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that area. Since I did work at Xavier, I kind of had a small inside position to figure out what that actually was. That Norwood Plaza area, including the Joseph building, is owned by a company called Xavier Propco, not Xavier. Okay? It is not owned by Xavier. However, Xavier does want that property. Probably, I would assume Xavier Propco wants that property, that building in specific, just to lay down either new asphalt, clear all the buildings that are there, and put up a huge parking lot. This has been something that I've heard for over 12 years. I did work for Xavier between 2010 and 2015. So I was hearing this back in 2010, 11, 12, the fact that they wanted all those buildings up there. They wanted to demolish them, put brand new blacktop down, and create this ginormous parking lot for Xavier. To date, I believe that those are still the plans. And this is one area, the Xavier Propco, or Xavier, I'm still trying, I have not gone in to look to see what the connections between the two are. However, I believe that is the one reason that Joseph does need to move, is because they technically are leasing, I believe are leasing that property from Xavier Propco. And Xavier Propco has they don't have to renew a lease. So they can let the lease expire and say, bye, go find yourself a new place. At that point, Xavier Propco can demolish the building and do what they want with the lot, including adding additional parking. I believe that's what they've already done with Long John Silver's. So I wanted you guys to get a little inside of that Xavier does not own that Norwood Plaza property. A company called Xavier Propco owns that property. What the connection is between them, I still haven't looked deep enough into it to figure it out, but that's where a lot of this is coming from is, they can't build on that property. They can't put this vision on that property. And that's why they have to move. So now, the other question comes, okay, let's find somewhere else for them to go in Norwood. Where? Zumbiel was mentioned, but Zumbiel's already taken and planned for. There's nothing there for them to do. Where? I mean, they're not going to put it up at Perry and Derrick. That's off the beaten path. It's not heavily traveled. That's not a place for them to go. There is nowhere in Norwood other than where they're going to put their business. That's why I'm looking at this as saying, let's just change this and move on to their plans, and let's talk about their plans.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. Bonzel, do you have your hand up, sir?
Yeah, I just want to note, I don't know the exact relationship between Xavier and Xavier Propco, but from all intents and purposes, they're essentially the same. I mean, anytime that we talk to people from Xavier, they talk as if, Leslie Stevenson and I met with, former councilman, we met with John, I think it's John Kucha, he's like the vice president of administration a couple of years ago, and they essentially control that property. So they're basically one and the same, and that's also why you see the blue call boxes for Xavier on the Xavier Propco's property. And as well, if it was a company that was truly trying to make a profit, then they would probably keep renewing leases instead of, continually not renewing leases so that they can demolish buildings to have more parking for Xavier. So just want to be clear there. And then also, Xavier Propco does not own the dealership location. It's owned by TDM Enterprises or some similar name, which essentially is controlled by their general manager. So there is some familiarity. It's not, for everything that it sounds like to me, I can't imagine the general manager owning the property and wanting to evict their tenant. I think it's probably more of as they've alluded to, a national VW wanting to refresh their brand after the diesel scandal and other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. Mr. Braden, you had your hand up, sir.
Oh, yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you. So I just, I want to say that I agree with all the residents that came in front of us tonight, and I understand everyone's points of view, and Mr. DeLuca, I appreciate your comments, and makes it a little more difficult for me to move on. My sentiments on this is, we have a group, and I also want to talk about what the Joseph Group has meant to Norwood for years and years and years, and we have a great relationship, and that they're a fantastic business that have been good to us. And so, not that the Volkswagen dealership is a good business, and it's been in Norwood for years, as long as I can remember, so I can appreciate that. And so we have a developer here that wants to develop the site that has been vacant since I was a child. I haven't seen anything work in this site since I can remember. So we have a developer that wants to develop this site, and I've heard, I understand everyone what they say. This could be so much more. We could have, this, and we want this, but quite frankly, I don't see any other developers here tonight that are willing to fork out the money to do this. I do see one, and that's the Joseph Group. So I'm kind of wanting to ask that we allow them to do this, and so that's kind of where I'm at. It's like a bird in the hand. I know what the potential is, but it's potential. It could be. It's not what is. What is the Joseph Group is here, ready to develop that site. So that's what I have to say, and whatever I do is because of those reasonings that I'm dealing with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Tracy.
This will be my last one for this particular ordinance here. Back in, I guess it was April, May, June, somewhere in that area when we were discussing Cappies, I was accused, or I guess it was mentioned by Councilman Braden and agreed upon by several other council members that we are not the gatekeepers of Norwood. We don't sit here and tell businesses what we can and can't do. Yes, we are doing that with this ordinance technically. However, if we go back to that where I was told that we should not be telling businesses what to do and what not to do and holding things hostage, it comes up with the same issue with this here. You know, we shouldn't be doing that at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Mr. DiNardo.
Yeah. I hear that, and I tried to address it earlier. I did do that. I was one of the people who did speak a lot of the spirit of what you're referring to there. I think what tipped the scale for me is the fact that in this particular case, the ordinance is already in existence. So here, where the motion for you was to remove the prohibited uses that were established in 2014. I think we already went through for 4 meetings now, what I think was a very strange and silly set of events, some on Norwood's part, some on Joseph's part, but at the end of the day, what tips the scale, or what makes this different from January and April, is the fact that the ordinance is already here. So the vote, in this case, your motion, is to remove that language or change the plan that was already set out for that space in 2014. That's a very different thing, and that's why I feel it's okay to do that.
I don't agree.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Mr. Thompson.
Just sort of to continue that line of thought, we're being asked basically to change the law for the convenience of one of our businesses. This law existed before the company decided to purchase that property, and we can all agree that it probably wasn't fair the way that they were led to believe that they could. If they were led to believe that, however much due diligence was done or was not done, it's kind of beside the point. The point is, like I said, we're being asked to change a law because people made a decision and they weren't aware of the law that was in place, and so they just want us to change that. And I don't think we would do that for any other laws on the books. If somebody did something and didn't want to stand by what they had done, they wouldn't come to us and ask us to change the codes so that it made it easier for them to do things. That's what this goes back to for me. It's a code that's been on the books for years. I don't know why it was put there. Yeah. I have a feeling that people thought that there might be an auto business put there at some point, and they were on council and they didn't want that to happen. Regardless, that was 4 councils ago. For me, I just don't think it's the right use for that property. And to what Mr. Braden said, I wanted to respond about, we do have a developer here now, but the value of that property has increased exponentially over the last couple of years. It did sit fallow for years and years and years. It was because there was nothing there to develop it for. Now we have a reason in the Wasson Way to develop it to be something that Norwood can and people can gravitate towards, and to be a good representation of our city. So I see where you're coming from. It's like, yes, we have a developer now, but situations have changed. and we already have an ordinance on the books. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Kelch.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I'd like to thank all the residents for coming out tonight. It's obviously a big meeting with big items on the table. And I'd also like to thank the Josephs and their representation for coming out. Currently, the Joseph dealership is in my ward, Ward 1, and they'll be moving to another ward, it seems like, regardless of the decision made, out of necessity rather than desire. But, I would like to wish them the best going forward, whichever, if this does pass, if it doesn't pass. I wish you guys the best. You guys have spent a lot of years here in Norwood. Hopefully, if it doesn't pass, then, you guys can find another spot here in Norwood. If not, definitely wish you guys and your family and your company the best. With that said, I have heard from a lot of residents, both in my ward and not in my ward, about this. Probably more than any other items came across our tables, respectively, here. And I do share the support of what the trail seems to have been made for. And it's that community outreach, that community build. And I would like to see Norwood take the stance to support that going forward. So with that, I am prepared to vote to turn this down.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Anyone else? Any other comments? Mr. Brady?
Yes, last comment. Thank you, Mr. President. And I appreciate that. I appreciate those comments, Mr. Thompson, and you're absolutely correct. I'm not disagreeing with anything that you said. I'm very reasonable. So, but what I'm hearing is that we're willing to gamble, and we hope that something better comes along. So that's what I'm hearing. Lost my train of thought. So I also believe that the Joseph Group realizes what they have, and I believe that they will cater to the Walson Way project. That is very important to me and to all of us. So I believe that they know what they have there, and I believe that they will cater to any request or, so it is my belief that they will do what is possible to make that a beautiful and vibrant place for all of us to enjoy.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Anyone else? Mr. Tracy?
All right, well, I guess since we're not going to get to the other two ordinances, I'll put out what I was going to put out with those because they seem to fit it anyway.
Well, I just say, Mr. Chair, I think we probably will get to at least one of them tonight. There probably will be additional discussion.
Well, I hope so because otherwise I'll get my discussion out later because I feel that some of us that haven't had a chance to speak about this either, because I can't stand up here and go over there and speak, should be able to speak on this as well without having anything. So
you had your opportunity. You could have went and spoken in favor or against. It happens all the time. Look at all of our years of
that's
council.
fine. Okay, Mr. Gabbard, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anyone else? Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
No.
Mr. Gabbard?
No.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
No.
Mr. DiNardo?
No.
Mr. Thompson?
No.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present. We have 2 ayes, 5 noes. Motion fails. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would make a motion that we remove Ordinance L2 from the agenda.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to remove L2 from the agenda.
Second.
Mr. DiNardo with a second. Any discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this L2 basically just accepts the actual PUD plan, the site layout, where things are going. Removing it from the agenda just means that we're not going to vote on it tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any further discussion? Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
I apologize. Who seconded that motion?
That was Mr. DiNardo.
Me, please.
DiNardo, okay. And are we taking off just L2 or L2 and L3?
Just L3
Okay.
has to happen. So.
Oh, okay. I got you. All right. Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting, we have 6 ayes, 1 no. Motion passes. Moving on to item L3. Mr. Bonzo.
I would make the motion that we have all 3 readings of item L3.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to have all 3 readings. Do I have a second? Mr. Thompson? Any discussion? No discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yeah.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings of L3?
Ordinance denying the preliminary and final plans submitted on behalf of Pond Realty Company for a planned unit development in the General Business District, GBD PUD, for the 3.35-acre assemblage of real property located at the southeast corner of Montgomery Road and Lexington Avenue, including real property identified on the Hamilton County Auditor's records as parcels Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 130, 131, 3732 Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 57, 53, and 54. Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 132. And a portion of parcel number 651, 57, 55, 56, 57, 58, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68. Ordinance denying the preliminary and final plans submitted on behalf of Pond Realty Company for a planned unit development in the General Business District, GBD PUD, for the 3.35-acre assemblage of real property located at the southeast corner of Montgomery Road and Lexington Avenue, including real property identified on the Hamilton County Auditor's records as parcels Montgomery Road 651, 54, 130, and 131, 3732 Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 57, 53, and 54. Montgomery Road, 651, parcel number 651, 54, 132. And a portion of parcel number 651, 57, 55, 56, 57, 58, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68. Ordinance denying the preliminary and final plans submitted on behalf of Pond Realty Company for a planned unit development in the General Business District, GBD PUD, for the 3.35-acre assemblage of real property located at the southeast corner of Montgomery Road and Lexington Avenue, including real property identified on the Hamilton County Auditor's records as parcels Montgomery Road, 651, 54, 130, 131, 3732 Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 57, 53, and 54. Montgomery Road, parcel number 651, 54, 132. And a portion of parcel number 651, 57, 55, 56, 57, 58, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, and 68.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bondsman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to pass the ordinance. Second by Mr. DiNardo.
Yes, please.
Any discussion? Mr. Bonzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I think we had kind of interrupted Mr. Tracy because he was wanting to talk about the site plan but didn't realize that we would likely still be voting on a site plan today. So I would just like to invite him to contribute if he has things he wants to.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. Mr. Tracy.
Sure. I guess it's kind of pointless as to me speaking anyway at this point, but let me put some thoughts into some people's heads, even though it's not going to help. I appreciate the residents coming out. That's great. I saw a group that went to the Norwood Together group to work with them in order to instill what they felt would be comfortable on the Wasson Way. They didn't have to do that. Absolutely not. Had this ordinance been written with them allowed to do this property, they could have put the building up without even having that ordinance even on the books to be changed. So, you know, they didn't have to go to Norwood together. They didn't have to talk to the residents to find out about landscaping, to put up bike racks, to put up a repair station. They didn't have to do that. It's their property, their business, if they were able to put their business there. However, they did that. How many other car dealerships do we have in the city of Norwood? I think other than the Joseph Group, one other car dealership, and it's a buy here, pay here, up in Ward 4, right at the corner of Montgomery and Fenwick. Hole in the wall, crappy looking building. We also have a methadone clinic going right across the street from it. I mean, you know, I know I keep talking about Ward 4. Ward 4 seems to be getting the shaft on a lot of things, which is fine. We'll deal with that later. But we literally have only one dealership in the city of Norwood. And it's a buy here, pay here dealership. Joseph has been here since before I was born. And I'm 38 years old now. So, you know, they've been here a lot longer than me. Also, I've heard arguments that kind of contradicted themselves from some of the residents. I heard arguments that said, why not bring in multi-use development to this property and incorporate it with University Station? Then I heard the argument of, if Joseph puts their car dealership there, it's going to take away from University Station and not connect people with University Station. That argument there kind of contradicts itself. The other argument I have is, where are the people that are against this property, not just the residents, but council members as well, going after Xavier Propco or Xavier University regarding Norwood Plaza? Norwood Plaza has been run down, how many, I can't even count the number of years it's been run down. But it looks like crap as well. So why not take that and encourage Xavier to put the green space in, put walking paths in there, even if it's only half of the parking lot that's there now. Allow Joseph to go over where they're at, connect Wasson Way to that parking lot, which connects you to University Station, Betta's, the barbecue, all those businesses around there, and have a nice green space in there with trees, benches, walking path. Something else that you can utilize for that green space that might not happen or that might not be at the Joseph Dealer Group. Now you're expanding your footprint of the trail. You know, yes, their property is worth a whole lot. You know, I don't see a developer coming in and purchasing that property at pennies on the dollar and saying, oh yeah, I can put up an affordable restaurant here, and I can put up an affordable restaurant here, and I can put up a house here that I can sell for $200,000, and I can put up, you know, this brewery here. These small businesses are not going to have the money or the capital right off the bat to go into a spot where the developer comes in and buys for, I don't even know how much it's worth at this point, but millions of dollars at this point. You know, we're, as Councilman Braden, yes, had said, you know, we're taking a gamble at this point. We're flipping a coin. You know, heads, tails. We take a gamble. What happens if that area up there stays vacant for 15, 20 years? Now we've lost income revenue. We've lost property value. We've lost, you know, we've lost a lot of things out there for 15, 20 years that it may not come back. Yes, the real estate bubble may burst soon, and Norwood's values may drop down, and somebody might be able to afford it. But I don't see another developer coming in here and developing something that is affordable for small business, for a small coffee shop, for a small bakery. I just don't see the capital for these small businesses to come in here. Would I like to see a Buskins over there? Absolutely. Bring Buskins back to Norwood. Do I think it's reasonable for them to come back to something like that? I don't think so. I think it's a huge gamble that we're looking to make, and there's so many other opportunities that we can expand on if Joseph was allowed to develop that land. You know, I think we need to look at Norwood Plaza. I think we need to put some heat on Xavier. I think we need to, you know, make sure that property at Norwood Plaza is developed properly and not just a parking lot. A lot of people cried about a little itty-bitty parking lot at Joseph Auto Group, saying that they needed more green space. I think that almost is 10 times larger than that little parking lot that was supposed to be at Joseph Auto Group. You know, if Xavier wants to build a hotel, absolutely let him build a hotel there. Brings money to the city of Norwood. But let's do something. Let's not just let it sit vacant for all these years and just crumble. This is just, I don't think anybody's looked at it with a wide lens at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Anyone else?
One last comment.
Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the only other thing that come to mind is someone made the comment that, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but someone made the comment that, you know, we don't want to change the ordinance that was in place in 2014, and I tend to agree with that. However, what comes to mind is how many times did we change the ordinance or the PUD overlay to accommodate our playing card site? I'm sure we've done that, right? So it happens, and that just came to mind. I just wanted to bring that we don't want to use that excuse because we've probably done that 3 or 4 times on that playing card site. So it happens, we do it. That's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Anyone else? Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
No.
Mr. Tracy?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
No.
All members present, we have 4 ayes, 3 yeses, 4 ayes, 3 noes. Motion passes. Now we're going to back to item H, request to address council. We had 1 request this evening. Pastor Sonny James.
Hey,
forgive me.
I was going to request just a quick 5-minute recess. A lot of these people came for this particular public hearing and these ordinances just to give them a chance to leave if they so choose to without it getting rid of it, because it kind of gets a little loud.
We'll take a brief recess.
Thank you. Sorry, Pastor.
we're item 8.
Pastor St. James, 1830 Hopkins Avenue. First, I want to send out condolences to the family, the neighbors, friends, peers of the residents that were horrified by a fire recently in our community. I want to also commend our firefighters who, on a regular basis, go out of their way and at a moment's notice, a lot of times without much notice, have to potentially put their lives on the line. And to do that kind of work, they really need to be commended on a regular basis. I also want to just gain clarity. You know, oftentimes when you challenge people, I understand certain cultures aren't used to being challenged, and when you challenge them, they feel so uncomfortable, so they all band together to form a cohesive group. I want people to know that we've got a lot of great residents in this community that are doing a lot of great work. I don't want anybody to think that because I make challenges that I don't love my community, that I don't honor and recognize all of the great work that goes in. I have to say publicly, I really love and adore Mary C. Miller, being bold enough on a regular basis to even come to my home and knock on my door and challenge me, and to declare that we are going to work together. So I applaud all of the work that Norwood together and some of the others that they have put into this city to make it better. Just want all of us to understand, as smart as you all are, you know, in the midst of a city council member meeting where the majority of everybody who was sitting here, and maybe even the majority of you, what you don't realize is as people are watching, you know, they're sending text messages out saying, I'm sorry. And then they're mentioning specific names, which I won't mention. So embarrassed and disappointed. These are your friends. These are your friends that communicate these things. Guys, what I want for this community is for us to move together as one people. I want us to move forward and love each other, not always agree. I'll give you a perfect example. I love Councilman Gabbard, but I'm so angry with my friend, but I know he loves me as a human being, maybe personally, but as a human being, he respects me. You know, when we say, okay, one resident and their time means more than another resident and their time, and we take a 5-minute break that I'm sure your clock's all working, that was longer than 5 minutes. What do we say to the one resident that continually walks around and feels like you just don't give a darn? You know, I came here tonight with full intentions to blast my dear mayor. I came here tonight with full intentions to expose more stuff that just keeps us divided. And I'm not going to do that, because our mayor has a job to do. He's got to do it to the best of his ability like everybody else. And it's our job, guys, even though we don't agree with each other, it's our job to work together. And so I want to challenge all of you. You know, we've just celebrated Black History Month. I want to thank Mr. Thompson for bringing that ordinance to the table. We've done some great Black History events. But, you know, being black is 365. That's all right, let that go on. Come on, let's stay right here. I want to encourage you all that we're continuing the celebration of Black History Month. And so on the 27th, I want you all, don't worry, you don't have to go out to a park and be around folks. But we're going to have a movie called The Safety. You can go on to www.elevationsenrichment.com and come and celebrate with people that you might not normally sit with. Let's bring each other together. Let's support everybody. Don't tell people publicly not to come. Tell people to come, and then you show up. God bless you all. I believe in us, guys. Let's continue to press toward that mark and to continue to be better. God bless you all.
Thank you, Pastor James. That's the only request we had this evening. Now we're moving on to item I, reports of standing committees of council, finance, budget, and audit committee meeting March 3rd, 2021. Mr. DeNardo.
To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Finance, Budget, and Audit, was referred bond refinancing Cornerstone and Linden Point, FRP 2021 preliminary conversation, and any open and significant claims against the city. Beg leave to submit the following report. Presentation from Andy Broussard and Pat Woodside on the opportunity to refund or refinance to a lower interest rate the Cornerstone and Linden Point bonds. Cornerstone runs at a deficit, so there's a risk of the property owner having to cover the shortfall, which will likely be passed on to tenants and hurt City of Norwood's revenue. Moving from what was approximately 6.2% to 2.5% interest rate keeps them neutral. For Linden Point, moving from a 6 and 5%, the bond TIF and the related Paycor note, this is at Linden Point, down to 2.6 generates around $80,000 a year, which would be likely be added to surplus. In the future, when the TIF surplus is confident to continue, we can consider utilizing the balance of the project, to projects that mutually benefit both Linden Point and the city. For the FRP, the draft was presented to a few of us and will be ready for today, March 9th meeting, which I can see it on the agenda. At the time, the auditor was waiting on responses from the state auditor's office. It seems like they got answered. I would like to, in a second, ask a question to Mr. President of Council to echo the sentiment that we need not only need to pass the FRP, but we need to get out of fiscal emergency. And I know we're only going to be reading today, going off the topic, we're only going to be reading today on the report itself, but I'd like us to make sure that we continue to press both council and the City of Norwood to do everything on our end to try to get out of fiscal emergency in 2021. We're financially ready to do so. Let's make sure we can do it. Respectfully submitted by myself, Mr. Bonzel, Mr. Kelsch, and Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. DeNardo. Mr. Bonzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we receive and file the report.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to receive and file the report. Mr. Thompson. Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. DeNardo.
Yes, please. Just to follow on, and if you're appropriate to respond, on us getting out of fiscal emergency by the end of 2021. I think the FRP that some of us have seen in draft form, or that you will be talking about as a first reading tonight, financially does that. We've done it in 2020. We're going to do it again in 2021. We're in the right. The numbers tell us we're probably going to be there. Can we talk about what else will need to happen to get out of fiscal emergency by December 31st, 2021?
Well, Mr. DeNardo, we have to, the accounting methods, the report on accounting methods, we had 34 items, I believe, that we're working on. We have to correct all of those. Right now, the auditor's singular focus has been the plan for the last 3+ months. So consequently, she has not been able to come to council or come to City Hall to review the work that's been done. Obviously, I think COVID has played in a small role of that as well. But we're going to be meeting, I think, the 24th of this month, Mayor Schneider and myself and the rest of the commission. And once this plan has been approved, my focus is the report on accounting methods.
Thanks for that answer. Would you agree that if there was a top three, it's getting the numbers right, that looks good, reporting and accounting methods, totally get it. I think we've been kind of waiting on a first pass of their response for a while. And number three would be getting the audit back this summer, right? The 2020 audit, I'm trying to say. Would that be a nice top three? If we did all that, we'd be in a very, very good position.
I agree with you.
Thanks. Cool.
Anyone else? Motion on the floor by Mr. Bonzel. Is to receive and file, second by Mr. Thompson. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, motion passes.
Mr. President?
I'd like to make a motion that we move up L4, 5, and 6, since we have those gentlemen here for time restraints, because they've waited through all this, and we still got a lot of stuff to cover. That way, we can allow them to get moving as well.
Well, now we have, Mr. Gabbard, we have L 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, because we added 2. Right? Is that what you're saying?
No, just 4, 5, and 6.
We're just moving up 4, 5, and 6.
Just want 4, 5, and 6. Motion by Mr. Gabbard to move up item L 4, 5, and 6.
Second.
Second by Mr. Brady. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, motion passes. Move on to item L4, a resolution in support of Amtrak's proposed expansion of passenger rail services in Ohio and for the congressional actions needed to authorize and appropriate funds to the expansion. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is a resolution that I asked to be brought forward. We have Derek Bauman here, who's from All Aboard Ohio. He's actually spoken to Norwood Council in the past. Back in 2015, the council passed a resolution in support of taking actions to increase the frequency and speed of passenger service from Cincinnati to Chicago, recognizing that it improves economic development, as well as we have Siemens right here in Norwood that produces parts for Amtrak passenger trains. Cities like Oxford, Hamilton, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and I'm sure there's others have passed similar resolutions to the one that we're potentially about to consider. And if it's okay with you, Mr. President, I'd love to have Mr. Bauman from All Aboard Ohio to just give us just a quick synopsis of just what this is and why it's important that we make our voices heard.
Of course, Mr. Bonzo. Thank you. Sir?
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Derek Bauman. I'm a Cincinnati resident. Among a number of hats I wear in the community, as a retired police officer from the city of Mason, I am also a board member of All Aboard Ohio and have been in that role for about 7 years now. It's a statewide nonprofit supporting public transportation issues across the state of Ohio. What's happening right now, this is very exciting, as Councilmember Bonzel mentioned, in 2014 and 2015 timeframe, there was kind of a movement to increase our 3 times a week Amtrak Cardinal that goes through Union Terminal on its way to Chicago and around to DC and New York to daily service. We're still working on that. But in the meantime, Amtrak is proposing, has already proposed, and there is going to be legislation coming forward in Congress to work on what they're calling corridor plans, and there's 35 of them across the country. 5 of the 35 are here in Ohio. So what they're talking about doing, and what makes it different from past efforts, is not just giving the money to the states to figure out how to do it themselves. Many states either don't have the will or the capacity to build passenger trains and increase those types of things. Amtrak is saying we're going to do this ourselves if Congress gives us the money, and is not going to ask for any state dollars either for capital or for at least the first 5 years of operations. That's the language that's in the bill that's coming forward. Now, how that specifically relates to us, currently, as I mentioned, we have the 3 times a week Amtrak Cardinal, so it's 3 days, and then it comes back the other 3 days. So we have basically 1 train in the middle of the night at Union Terminal. What this would do is look at the corridor from Cincinnati to Indianapolis to Chicago, and also reviving the Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, Cleveland route. That route would have 3 round trips a day. The Indianapolis to Chicago route would have 4 round trips a day. So ultimately, if this comes through Congress and makes its way forward, what we would be looking at is going from 1 train a day at Union Terminal in the middle of the night to 15 trains a day, an additional 14, 7 departures and 7 arrivals to Columbus, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Chicago, and of course the intermediate points in between. We had a call, our organization had a call with the Amtrak official out of Chicago last week who was telling us about how on their train that goes from Chicago to St. Louis, for example, they have to add extra passenger cars on the weekends or the times when the Cubs are playing in St. Louis, playing the Cardinals. And that leads us to think about all types of marketing opportunities, economic development, tourism, and parallel to this, Oxford, Ohio was just approved for a stop because the current Cardinal train goes right through there with all those college students at Miami and doesn't stop, goes right through town. So there's going to be a stop at Oxford. Now, you add 4 trains a day to that, each direction, and you can think about Miami students coming down to spend time here in Cincinnati in the area, of a day and go back. And then as the councilman mentioned, we actually have a rail production industry here in Ohio, but we export the results of that. And that takes place right here in Norwood at Siemens, where there are parts and pieces for Amtrak locomotives and other rail cars built and then shipped out of here because we don't have that industry, or we don't have the transportation portion of it here in Ohio, so this would support that. So basically what we're doing is trying to rally and build support across the state, and this is going on elsewhere across the country, to send a message to our congressional delegation that we support this. There's all kinds of great opportunities, and if we could think of not having to jump in a car, but being able to be on a train, use that time productively, or even have a beer on the way because we're going to Chicago to watch the Reds play the Cubs, that's a good use of these dollars. And we see the success of it, such as I mentioned, from Chicago to St. Louis and other routes. So I could go on, but I know it's a late night. So with that being said, we ask for your support of this resolution. A number of other cities have brought this forward and passed it. I don't think there's been a single vote against it. We actually had a very conservative state rep out of Springfield, Ohio, State Senator Antani wrote an op-ed in support of this. So we're seeing great bipartisan support really across the country. And so we hope to really have a game changer here in Ohio if this passes. Thank you.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Out of curiosity, how long approximately would it take to go by Amtrak from Cincinnati to Chicago and Cincinnati to Cleveland?
So I don't know the answer to that right now, but I would offer this. Right now, between Chicago and Detroit and Chicago and St. Louis, the train runs at 110 miles an hour. When it started, it was not at those speeds. So what they do is basically get it started, and then we move to improve. So in other words, if there's a grade crossing that needs improvements or a certain section of rail that can only accept a certain speed, you improve that over time. So the short answer is I don't know exactly at this point, but whatever we get started, it would be using existing freight tracks. So it's not like a European high-speed type of thing, would not involve eminent domain and taking the rails already exist. But then we would work to improve that over time. So whatever the time is, the goal would be to shorten it over time. But they haven't given us that. We're not at that level of specificity yet.
I still think it's great. I just was curious.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Tracy.
I guess you've seen it once tonight, so I'll play devil's advocate on this one. My other fellow councilman there, he's probably thinking, pick your battles. But I know some of the answers to this question are going to be, well, Norwood residents can jump in their cars and drive down to the terminal, get on the train, go to Chicago. That's great. How does this benefit Norwood having this resolution?
How does it benefit Norwood?
Other than our residents jumping in their cars and going down the Union Terminal, getting on, going to Chicago.
I think that's a huge benefit right there. So that's number one. Number two, you have a production facility right here that makes the parts for these vehicles that get shipped to other states where they have them in operation. And to me, that's kind of a shame that we don't have that here.
And Siemens is going to be able to ramp up their production for this, something like this?
I mean, you'd have to ask them, but that would certainly be the hope.
Okay. I think, I'm looking at this, and yes, Oxford probably said, oh, great, let's vote on this resolution. They got to stop coming. Why couldn't there be a stop in Norwood?
I mean, we could talk about that. At the current time, the rail goes to, that's the direction that it goes at this moment.
And it just seems like we're looking at voting for this resolution, not getting a whole lot of benefit other than hoping that people rent cars to come to Norwood. Because we're not anywhere close to Union Terminal.
I'd just like to respond. I mean, this is, Norwood is also part of a larger community here. We're completely surrounded by the city of Cincinnati. We interact with that city every day, and we interact with those people every day. As Mr. Bowman said, it is an advantage for people in Norwood who maybe want to go to these other cities to be able to hop a quick car ride right down to the train station, and I imagine it'll be a lot cheaper than buying an airplane ticket. And to be able to do that, it's also going to bring more people to the area. There might not be a specific financial tangible benefit that we can cite that comes to Norwood just by doing this, but it's good for the area. It connects us with other places, which is just about being a good member of society and community, and that's why I think this is a great idea. I'm glad you brought it to us.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, so I just want to thank you again, Mr. Baumann, and I guess if we have any more questions, we can ask him when we get to the readings. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So with that, Mr. President, I'd like to move that we have all three readings of the resolution.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall to have all three readings. Mr. Braden would like to second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting. We have 6 ayes, 1 no. Motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings?
A resolution in support of Amtrak's proposed expansion of passenger rail services in Ohio and for the congressional actions needed to authorize and appropriate funds to the expansion. A resolution in support of Amtrak's proposed expansion of passenger rail services in Ohio and for the congressional actions needed to authorize and appropriate funds to the expansion. A resolution in support of Amtrak's proposed expansion of passenger rail services in Ohio and for the congressional actions needed to authorize and appropriate funds to the expansion.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall.
Pass resolution. Thank you.
Pass the resolution. Mr. Thompson.
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting, all members present, we have 6 ayes, 1 no. Resolution passes. Moving on to item L5, ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with SNJ Data Center, LLC, doing business as Encore Technologies, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Move we have all three readings of the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to have all three readings of the ordinance. Mr. DiNardo.
Second, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Any discussion? Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
I was going to say, we talked about it at Economic Development Committee, so I imagine at least the 4 members were in support, and the public would have heard about that. I think it's all good, but
Thank you, Mr. Donato.
it didn't sound like anyone had it. Oh, never mind, wrong.
Mr. Tracy?
I do apologize, I did miss that meeting. Can I get a slight, maybe a quick couple sentences on this one?
I mean, I think we should let the Encore guy probably just introduce the project, because he's been here all day.
I appreciate it. That's what I just...
Good call.
Mr. Burns? We have questions for Mr. Burns?
Well, did you just want to talk, like, maybe give a quick synopsis, couple of
what you're
paragraphs
gonna do, yeah.
of what you all are doing, and like what improvements are coming?
Yeah. So we have the old Med Pace building, the last remaining building from the old GM assembly plant. We have a data center in there, cost about $10 million to build that. We're doing some other improvements, or hoping to, for a client of ours, we'll be spending another roughly 9.5. 8 of it will be paid for by Encore Technologies. The other 1.5 will be paid for by our customer. It will mean additional jobs for us, but it'll also mean our customer will be bringing additional jobs in to the site as well.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Mayor Schneider?
Could I comment on that?
Yes, sir.
I would like to thank Mr. Burns for being here and for all the work that he's done bringing that facility on board and into the city. This is exactly what our CRA, our Community Reinvestment Act, should be doing. It's providing opportunities for businesses that are here to reinvest in our community, which holds them into our community, right? As they put more money into the business, they're not going to pick up and leave pretty quickly. This is an interesting way that they're using it too, the CRA. If you look at it, this is holding on to about, well, $3.6 million in earnings tax. And that's something that's the lifeblood of this city, is the people that come here and work, and that's really where we pay our bills from. So any operation like this that can come to us and that we can help, yes, we're going to forego some property taxes, but ultimately the earnings tax is what drives this city, and that's the exact reason why this is such a good deal for the city. There's 2 of these on the agenda for tonight. One is very large, like Mr. Burns, and a very complex business that he operates, and the other one is for Manor, which we'll talk about next. So this is very good for the city.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Anyone else? We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Donato, to have all 3 readings. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Donato?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings?
Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with SJN Data Center LLC, doing business as Encore Technologies, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with SJN Data Center LLC, DBA Encore Technologies, and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with SJN Data Center LLC, DBA Encore Technologies, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Gabbard?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we pass this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard to pass the ordinance. Mr. Braden?
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. Donato?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The ordinance passes.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on to item L6. Ordinance authorizing the mayor enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Manor LLC and declaring an emergency. Mr. Braden.
Motion, we have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mr. Braden to have all 3 readings. Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
To ask Mr. Ashpatel to come up. He is the one that requested this. I happen to know Mr. Patel from past. We used to work together a lot of years ago. And he reached out to me when he started this project. He bought the old Anna's and is currently working on that, and then reached out again and said, hey, what do you know about this place next door? And so he bought that and is using this for that. So Mr. Patel, if you could tell us a little bit about what your project is.
Yes, 4631. The first time I looked at that building was in August, and walked through it with a contractor. The contractor recommended that I tear the building down. That's how much work it needed. And he's my contractor, so he would have made a lot of money had I kept the building or bought it at the time. Nonetheless, in December, ended up purchasing this building, and our plan is to make it into an event center and rehab the apartments. The building has been vacant for anywhere from 3 to 5 years, from what I've been told. It was not winterized. All the pipes are busted, the entire HVAC systems coated in asbestos. That'll have to be remediated. Roof leaks. It's a borderline tear-down building, and that's kind of what I specialize in. For whatever reason, I take old, vacant, or abandoned buildings and turn them around. And each time I swear I'll never do that again, but here I am again. And Norwood's been phenomenal to work with. The residents, interacting with them through social media, on site, everybody at the building department has been great to work with, so kudos to you guys for what you've done here.
Mr. Tracy.
What's your plan for that building as far as what's going in there?
On the first floor, it used to be a dentist's office, then a lawyer's office. That'll all be gutted, and it'll be turned into an event center. And I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a beautiful courtyard in the rear of the building. It's not beautiful now. There's spare tires and toilets dumped there. But it's a potentially great open green space. It's a hidden gem in Norwood.
Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I just got to say, this is extremely exciting, because I think we all want to preserve the gym that we have and preserve, our historic buildings here in the city. So as much as we can, and not always possible, but it's very exciting that it's possible here and that you're doing that. And so I'm excited to vote yes.
I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sir, I too take dilapidated buildings and turn them into gyms, and I know exactly how difficult that can be. So I sympathize with you, and I thank you for the job that you're doing.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Gabbard.
I'd just like to say I appreciate the work that he's doing there. Mr. DeLuca just came in. He, between the two of you, there's only one other spot there maybe that between the two of you guys could acquire, and that whole block would be just a new, speaking of gyms, we're the gym of the Highlands. That should be our gym block. And so we appreciate all the money and efforts that both of you owners have put into that block and to improve it, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Thank you, sir. Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
And can you just remind us what the readings?
The motion, we have a motion by Mr. Braden.
Do all three readings.
The second by Mr. Thompson to have all three readings.
Perfect.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all three readings?
Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Manor LLC and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Manor LLC and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a community reinvestment area agreement with Norwood Manor LLC and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Gabbard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to make a motion that we pass this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard to pass the ordinance. Mr. Bonzo.
I'd like to second.
Second by Mr. Bonzo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
All members present, voting aye, the ordinance passes.
Good. Yeah, thanks for coming. I got it.
Now we're back to K.
Reading's the second ordinance.
Second reading.
Second reading.
Second reading of ordinance and resolutions. K1, ordinance reauthorizing the mayor and/or safety director to enter into an amended easement agreement with Regent Realty LLC for the Schoolhouse Outfitters LLC as originally authorized in ordinance number 35-2014 and declaring an emergency. Mr. Bonson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we have the second reading of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to have the second reading. Mr. Thompson.
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Bonzel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So while there's a few confusing things, I think, confusing to me, not probably confusing to anybody that knows what they're talking about when it comes to these property line stuff. But essentially, I had a few questions that I asked Mr. Moore tonight and asked you earlier today, but we're going to work on getting an answer to about just how this affects basically the block of the part of Regent between the two ends of Lexington, because it looks like in one of them there's some kind of an easement drawn in, but I don't know if it's very confusing the way it's drawn. I just want to make sure there's nothing that's going to potentially, that a future owner, School Outfitters would never do this, but I want to make sure there's nothing that a future owner could do to block that access to the Wasson Way with this easement that we're giving. So, again, I don't think there is, but I'd just like to ask that we have one reading and then we can look at it in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. Anyone else? Any further discussion? Motion on the floor by Mr. Bonzel, second by Mr. Thompson, to have a second reading. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present, voting. Motion passes. May we have the second reading?
The ordinance shuffling had me. Okay. Ordinance reauthorizing the mayor and/or safety service director to enter into an amended easement agreement with Regent Realty LLC for Schoolhouse Outfitters LLC, as originally authorized in Ordinance 35-2014 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item K3. Second reading of a resolution accepting the Montgomery Road redevelopment plan.
K2?
We need K2.
K2? No K2?
That's the ordinance authorizing the safety service director to bypass the competitive bidding.
Hold on.
No, we've shuffled everything.
See, it's not just me getting confused today.
There's a lot going on, right? Forgive me.
Got it?
Got it. Item K2, ordinance authorizing the safety service director or mayor to bypass the competitive bidding process and into a software as a service agreement with Peel 9 Incorporated to provide software and support for a records management and analytics system for the city of Norwood Police Department and declaring an emergency. Mr. Thompson.
Move we have the second reading.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to have the second reading. Mr. Braden.
Second that.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting. The motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have the second reading?
Ordinance authorizing the safety service director or mayor to bypass the competitive bidding process and enter a software as service agreement with Peel 9 Incorporated to provide software and support for a records management and analytics system for the city of Norwood Police Department and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Now moving on to item K3, a resolution accepting the Montgomery Road redevelopment plan. Thompson.
We have the second reading of this resolution.
Motion by Mr. Thompson to have the second reading of this resolution. Mr. Bonzel.
I'd like to second that.
Second by Mr. Bonzel. Any discussion? Mr. Bonzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the Hamilton County Commissioners, or the Board of Commissioners, whatever it's exactly called, they met today, and they actually had a presentation from Steve Johns, who did the presentation for us at the last meeting. And so he basically presented what he presented to us to the Hamilton County Commission. So they were pretty excited about it. They asked quite a few questions, and they asked Steve Johns at the end, like, is there anything else you need from us for this? Like, he basically said, well, pot of gold, exactly. Mr. Moore's, flashing some money here. So, yes, that's what he said, and they all kind of laughed, but they didn't say anything after that. So, but the cool thing is that they're aware of it. They were asking questions. They were excited that, Hamilton County was working with them, and Hamilton County Planning and Development, they were very, very positive for Norwood and for the people that are here in the city administration. So it was a good conversation all around. I just think we should all be proud. I just randomly saw it today, so kudos. I'm looking forward to, in 2 weeks, passing the thing.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. Anyone else? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson? Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present, we have 6 ayes, 1 no. Motion passes. May we have the second reading?
A resolution accepting the Montgomery Road redevelopment plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item L7. Ordinance amending Norwood codified ordinances 353.04 and 353.05 to allow metered automobile parking to be paid by digital payment by credit or debit card application and declare an emergency. Mr. Bonzel.
Maybe before we vote on this, if the mayor's here, do we know if there's a rush that we need to approve this now? It seems pretty basic and pretty easy, but basically saying in here that instead of just putting coins in a machine, you can also pay through some digital form that the city kind of specifies.
Mayor Schneider?
That's correct. It's pretty easy, pretty simple. It's just like every other community is doing. It's like Cincinnati's doing. It's an easy pay system. You don't have to carry change with you. You can use the app, and it's very much just taking advantage of technology. So I would recommend passing it and move on.
Thank you, Mayor Steiner. Mr. Bonzel?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. President. I would move that we have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzel to have all 3 readings. May I have a second? Mr. Braden?
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Mr. Bonzel?
Yeah, I just emphasize how funny it is, some of these codes that we have. The thing literally requires, it says deposit of coin required is literally the phrase that's in our Norwood ordinances. And I guess it made sense, 50 years ago, right? And they couldn't contemplate anything but coins being used. But it's nice we're kind of going into the future, so I think this is an easy one for us to check off the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzel. Mr. Tracy?
Guess I'll amend this ordinance, not amend another ordinance that was proposed tonight, but let's just amend an ordinance, something we do every day.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Anyone else? We have a motion on the floor by Mr. Bonzel, second by Mr. Braden to have all 3 readings. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. The motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have all 3 readings?
Ordinance amending Norwood codified ordinances 353.04 and 353.05 to allow metered automobile parking to be paid by digital payment by credit card or debit card application and declaring an emergency. Ordinance amending Norwood codified 353.04 and 353.05 to allow metered automobile parking to be paid by digital payment by credit or debit card application and declaring an emergency. Ordinance amending Norwood codified ordinances 35304 and 35305 to allow metered automobile parking to be paid by digital payment, by credit or debit card application, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonzo to pass the ordinance. May I have a second? Mr. DiNardo.
Second, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunzel?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am. All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item L8, ordinance approving the Fourth Amendment to the detailed financial plan for the city of Norwood and declaring an emergency. Mr. DiNardo.
I recommend we have all three readings here. I have a comment here in a second.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, sir?
I am making a motion that we have all three readings, and I'll comment a discussion.
Motion by Mr. DiNardo, have all three readings. Mr. Kelch. Second. Second by Mr. Kelch. Any discussion? Mr. DiNardo.
Yeah, I think if we have all three readings of this, it allows us to kind of get in line with what we need to see as a final plan. I mean, we're going to have a couple more, in my opinion, we're going to have another run or discussion on this. So I don't think there's a problem with having three, because we're going to have to talk about the plan again here in next 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Anyone else?
You don't think so?
Well, I mean, just, are you saying that you think that that there could be an amendment in the next few weeks? Is that what you're saying?
I think what we have to, my understanding is, if we have all three readings now and vote to pass this now, in 2 weeks or before the end of March, I think it's due on the final week of March 27th to 28th. So this allows us to have another review in 2 weeks.
It's 24th.
24th? Okay, yeah, so even before then.
Gotcha.
Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just kind of add I did talk to Mr. Stipp last night about this. I mean, he knew that we were not going to be able to get this until 6:30 or 7 tonight, so basically we didn't get it until we walked in today. So I mean, he's fully prepared for us to do one reading tonight and then, look it over. I know Mr. Kelch is pretty interested in some of the park stuff on there. And I don't even know exactly what all the change. I mean, I haven't seen a version of this since early February. So I would recommend that we potentially do, maybe if one reading, and then we can, at our next meeting, pass it.
So we wouldn't see it, sorry to
Mr. DiNardo.
I thought that this is a draft form and that we would see the final in 2 weeks, and we have to have this done before the 24th. I thought that was the 20th.
Okay, gotcha.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yeah, so this is approving, this is us stamping our approval on this year's, I mean, I say this year's, it can always be amended, but basically this year's financial recovery plan. So if we pass this tonight, we actually kind of deprive the city administration and the auditor's office. There are something small change that they have to bring to us, and we have to do, amend it.
That's fair. Okay, then I'd like to amend my motion.
Mr. DiNardo?
To have 2 readings, please.
Motion by amending his motion to first and second reading.
Yes, please.
Mr. Kelch?
I'll amend my second.
Mr. Kelch amends his motion as well. So we have a motion by Mr. DiNardo, second by Mr. Kelch, to have the first and second reading. Any further discussion?
I apologize. Was that the first and second then? Is that the current motion? Okay.
Mr. Geraci?
I'll vote yes on having the 2 readings. However, I have several concerns within this that, again, I didn't get until tonight. I have a concern that we're raising the fire department and giving them another $1 million in the budget. Wonder where that came from. There's several other things that I just happened to catch in the 10 minutes I was looking at it. But I'll vote to have the 2 readings.
Thank you, Mr. Geraci.
It's okay.
Anyone else? Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Brady?
Yes, ma'am. All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Mrs. Williams, may we have the first and second reading?
Ordinance approving the Fourth Amendment to the detailed financial plan for the city of Norwood and declaring an emergency. Ordinance approving the Fourth Amendment to the detailed financial plan for the city of Norwood and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item L9. Resolution declaring the necessity of levying a tax renewal for current operating expenses in excess of the 10 mil limitation and requesting the county auditor to certify matters in connection therewith and declaring an emergency. Mr. DiNardo?
I'd like to have all three readings on this. Hear me out there, Eric, when you get there.
Motion by Mr. DiNardo to have all three readings. Mr. Brady? I'll second that. Second by Mr. Brady. Mr. DiNardo?
Yeah, for discussion. You actually saw a version of this a couple months back. This is where we had to get calculations back to us, and then we could then put it on what we were told was going to be the primary election in a few months. Actually, it's going to be on the general election, so they had to redo the ordinance. This is what I spoke to Jim Stith about. So it's not a material change other than the date. But again, we should have all three readings so that we can get the calculations or computations back to us. Remember we had that argument about this is nothing more than getting information.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Anyone else? Mr. Kelch?
So just clarifying, so everybody at home watching, whoever we got watching at home still, or tomorrow can see, is this isn't exactly saying how much we're going to potentially get from this, is just saying, hey, we want to receive that information that we asked about.
We want to receive information.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So yeah, I mean, as 2 years ago, I would have said, like, we need to not renew this, we need to put it into a street levy, and only focus that money on streets. But I do think, though, with the way that COVID's changing and we don't know where offices are going in the future, I do think it's important that we at least get the information and be prepared in June, July, I think July's the deadline, to put this on the ballot if we so choose. So this is, I am going to support this. I do think it's important.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Anyone else? Mrs. Williams, please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. May we have all three readings?
Resolution declaring the necessity of levying a tax renewal for current operating expenses in excess of the 10 mil limitation and requesting the county auditor to certify matters in connection therewith and declaring an emergency. Resolution declaring the necessity of levying a tax renewal for current operating expenses in excess of the 10 mil limitation and requesting the county auditor to certify matters in connection therewith and declaring an emergency. Resolution declaring the necessity of levying a tax renewal for current operating expenses in excess of the 10 mil limitation and requesting the county auditor to certify matters in connection therewith and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Braden?
Motion we pass the resolution.
Motion by Mr. Braden, pass the resolution. Mr. DiNardo?
Second, please.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item M, administrative reports. Mayor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. President. Get a drink of water before I start, but I do want to point out that there were a couple of comments made, and I think it's important to realize that the city of Norwood has a ton, literally a ton, of green space compared to other communities. By my count, we have, I think it's 14 or 15 actual parks in our 3 little mile radius. So I'll name some of those off because I don't think people recognize how many parks we have. We have Burwood Park, which was said that there's a huge drainage problem and that it's a mess, but My kids grew up going to Burwood Park their whole life, and we didn't have drainage problems, and the equipment that we had down there was pretty good. And I think Councilman Kelch has already improved it by putting other stuff down there, and there's blue mulch, and so I think Burwood Park's a great park, and I walked to Burwood Park. I walked to Burwood Park with my wife the other day. There's Northwoods Park. There's Doral Field. There's Marsh Park. Victory Park, which now has a huge green space area, a lawn, where we will start having activities, where we can start having bands playing and different things going on. Victory Park. There is the Williams Community Garden, and I know that they do a great job with that. That's a nice park. It's a park that's there. There's also the little micro park. My mom just started walking, and she walked from her house on Forest Avenue down to Floral Avenue to the little micro park. And she actually talked to me that evening and said it was nice having that there because she hasn't been walking, and there was a nice bench to sit there. So she sat there for 15 minutes, watched the cars go by. She did exactly what they want that little micro park to be used for, and it was perfect. I was like, I can't wait to tell them that happened. So there's this little micro park. There's Millcrest Park, which is Upper Millcrest. Upper Millcrest and Lower Millcrest are huge parks. There's baseball fields, there's sand volleyball in those parks. There's a huge soccer field at Lower Millcrest. There's a huge picnic area at Lower Millcrest. Upper Millcrest, there's a huge baseball diamond that our high school uses. There's a picnic area that can be rented. There's bathrooms in there, right? That's Upper and Lower Millcrest, huge parks. Fenwick Park. Fenwick Park is a beautiful park. I think it's one of the best that we have for picnics and for graduation parties and birthday parties that can be rented. That's another park. Waterworks Park. What a gem that is. You know, and look at the size of it. It's absolutely gargantuan. We got three baseball diamonds. We've got the huge football field in the stadium complex. Granted, that's the school, but that is park space. We've got the newly done Lisa Tanner upper area, the tot lot that has brand new equipment that's absolutely beautiful. And then in the lower area, we have 3 tennis courts that I don't think half the people in Norwood, it seems like the people that were here didn't realize. We have 3 tennis courts, and we have two basketball hoops that are full-size basketball courts there. So that's Waterworks Park. We have Tower Park, which hasn't been used much, but Tower Park used to be an incredible gem of the Highlands because there were walkways that went up there. But it is a park that the Parks Department does maintain, and they do cut grass at. It's still green space. It's also a historic area. You know, so the mound, the Indian mound, and there's still an Indian mound up there. We have Heritage Park that's right next to City Hall that's being revamped here soon. That's another park that we maintain. We also have Hunter Park. Hunter Park's a nice park. We're getting ready to advance and do more things in Hunter Park also. So that's, let's see. And then, I forgot, Lender Park, the McCullough Nature Preserve, is huge with nature trails to walk back. The old duck pond that's there, the old swimming hole, the Jethro Bodine. I call it the Jethro Bodine swimming hole because when the McCullough family was there, the McCullough Seed Company, that was the place to be if you were in elite society. And it's a beautiful park that we have. So, you know, when people say we don't have much green space, oh, thank God we got this place over here, right on the edge of the city of Norwood. We've got 13 or 14 parks. If you haven't explored the city that you live in, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but if you haven't explored to the city that you live in, look at all the other parks that we have. And when it comes to walking, quite frankly, we never had, as I grew up and as a kid, I never had the Walson Way Trail. That was all train tracks, and clearly you wouldn't go back there on the train tracks. We had these things called sidewalks all through our community, and we walked on them. And the street that I live on, I have to watch while pulling out the driveway because so many people still walk on those sidewalks. And they don't walk on those sidewalks to go just to one place. They walk on those sidewalks to go all over my community. They walk to the Creamy Whip. I don't know, there was somebody who mentioned walking to Graders. I don't know many people in Norwood that walk to Graders. We walk to a UDF. That's our hometown thing. We got UDFs all over the place. You walk your family over there, or you go to the Creamy Whip. And that's every ward. It's not one ward. Every ward has, these parks are spread throughout our city. And we do park cleanups. There's a park cleanup coming up. I probably should mention that, but If you haven't seen it, I'll start mentioning it, and we'll send out an email on it. There's park cleanups. There's all sorts of different cleanups coming on. But it's hard for me as the mayor to sit here and listen to people say, this is all we have. We got to protect what we have. We have so much. And there's so much time and effort and resources put into that it's hard to say, you know, we're focused on one little area, one area that's very small in our community. These parks are gems. Some of them are hidden gems. Burwood Park is at the end of Burwood. You're right, you do have to sort of hunt them out. Maybe I need to work on that and making sure people know where those are. But our walkable neighborhoods is something that we've worked on, the administration has worked on. We got grant money, actually, we got CDBG money to improve our walkability, ADA curb ramp replacement. We received $30,000 in a grant for that this year to make our sidewalks and the curbs even more compliant for ADA, but also it's for strollers. It's for people that are out walking their kids. And they're out walking everywhere. They're not just walking in one area. And I think everybody, we need to keep that in mind, that we've got people all over the city of Norwood that are walking. And I mean, Indian Mound is a walking area. We're gonna work on that too. So those are important parts to remember. The tennis courts, the basketball courts, we're improving our recreation, you know, as we speak. There's the mayor's task force is working on the new recreation building. So move around the city a little more than just your little scope and look at the city, because there's tons. There's 13 or 14 parks that we maintain on a regular basis. The CDBG, the block grant money that we received, we were awarded $750,000 in this grant money, the city of Norwood, $750,000 over the next 3 years. That's more than any other community in Hamilton County. So, you know, we applied for a lot of stuff, and it's going to be a challenge for the staff to get all this stuff together and going in the right direction. But there's a lot of grant money that we received out of that. Remarking of Montgomery Road, we're getting, you know, we remarked the yellow lines, the traffic control lines in the sort of the late fall, and now we're going to start doing the white lines and trying to get that traffic control stuff back in place and get all those markings in place. And I know Montgomery Road is not a great driving surface. There are a lot of areas that need repair and need to be updated. But just getting the traffic lines marked and it being less confusing as people drive down the road is something that we're going to work on in the beginning. Then the FRP, I do want to talk about the FRP briefly, because there's a lot of time and effort put into the FRP. So it really started, if you think about it, it started in March of 2020. We began the reconstruction of the spreadsheets and putting everything together for the 21 FRP. In May of 2020, we created the tax budget, the 2021 tax budget, and worked on building the FRP, putting the totals in, and working on it and getting the Excel template in good shape. In August, we began payroll templates for the FRP. That's a lot. There's a lot of challenges getting all the payroll information in there properly. September 2020, department heads, all the department heads provided their information for the budget that goes into the FRP. That was September that they started sending all that in. And we gave them deadlines. Fire chief, police chief, we need your budget at this time. Clint Zimmerman, we need your budget at this time. And they got that information to us. In October, we started to work on reassessing capital projects. This is 2020, in October of 2020, looking at capital projects. I tell all of the department heads, I tell everyone, as we're working through the year, when you come to me and say, we need this or we need that, I say, put it on a piece of paper and put it in your file, because that's going to need to come to us when we're asking for the capital projects, when you're looking at your budget stuff. So they work on those things constantly. In November, we went over the capital plan. We did insurance elections. If you think about it, all this is dynamic and fluid. We've got to get good insurance projections for 2021 to put into the plan. So we got all those things together in November. They were all entered in. Those are all, you know, when you talk about the insurance costs, that's health insurance for the employees. So that affects and looks at your payroll cost and what your deductions are and all that. So it's a challenging part. In December, we came to council. We presented some capital improvement information to council members, and we said, send us some feedback. couple of council members sent us some feedback and said, can you change this or change that? Let's add things or delete things, and we worked with council members on the capital improvement plan, which is part of what you're seeing today. In January, we closed out, we have to close out the year. We got to close out 2020 and find out what your actual expenditures were to put together the budget. So in January, we were working on that. We were moving some employees around. You've got separation pay. You've got different things going on. New insurance elections had to go in, the start of those, and then they have to be verified, all that information. In February, we started, we've been in contact with the Auditor of State, basically our supervisor, constantly through this process. We are talking to them and talking about how we get things done. But in January, we started February, we started feeding some information and getting a little more feedback on here it is, it's came together and here's what it is. So then, I think March 3rd, it was discussed at the Finance Committee. March 4th, we started we got updates and we put them in, which was the Auditor of State recommendations, which is our financial supervisory. Ultimately, it's the Financial Recovery Commission that has to approve this thing also. So for us, for the auditor and for myself as the mayor and for the president of council, we're working to satisfy the commission and make sure that everything's going right. So when you get this information, as a council member, you sort of feel like, I should have gotten this a lot earlier. Well, it doesn't come together so that we can provide you the package a lot earlier. It sort of comes together, and then as we get it, we try to get it to you as quick as we can. But we are, we have the auditor's office to work with, and when I say that, the state auditor's office to work with, and guess what? They're not just working on Norwood stuff. They're working on other communities that are having challenges also. So sometimes we're on the back burner, and then we push a little and say, hey, we need to get some information from you, and we get it. And sometimes she sends us something, and it takes us a while to get it. So it does take. The FRP and working with the Financial Recovery Commission is a huge extra burden on the staff at City Hall. The auditor's office, his staff is working on all sorts of different reports and payroll calculations and all that stuff constantly. But it's a lot of time and effort. It is, I hope, and the chairperson of the Finance Committee said, we'd like to be out of this financial recovery, financial crisis, and man, when we get there, then we're sort of the master of our own destiny. We still clearly want to continue utilizing all the different tools that they've put in place, that they've presented to us and said, this is how you need to do it, putting together a 5-year plan and all that. We'll continue using all those plans, and we'll still use them for guidance. But we want to get to a point where it's, the council and the mayor's office and the auditor's office and the treasurer's office and president of council, and we're working on this together, and we come up with a good plan. So there's a lot of work with that. And then within that, as you're looking over the information you have, you talk about capital projects, and it's sort of interesting to me because when I talk to Clint Zimmerman, I talk to the superintendent of public works, I'll say, yeah, we're getting close on the capital plan, we've got it, and he'll go, did you get me a new tar kettle? Do you have a new tar kettle in there? Because we really need a tar kettle. And these guys get so excited about some of this equipment that you're like, what do you need a new tar kettle for? But they need a new tar kettle. There's for the fire department, they need a diesel exhaust ventilation. They need to upgrade some of that stuff. If you think about firing up that big vehicle inside the building, that's heading right into the dormitory, into the dorm rooms and all that. So, and then a scan tool for public works, the garage. Those guys save us a ton of money, and absolutely save us a ton of money and time and effort when it comes to a snow event like we had the snow event. We had plow trucks going down. It's really hard on the equipment that way. So those guys are important. And then, even replacing the sand filter, potentially replacing the sand filter at the swim pool, that's a big expense that we might have to do this year. And when they do that, they have to go through the roof with the thing because it's so big, but there's an access hatch and stuff. But it's as you look at some of these capital project stuff, you go, why do we need that stuff? All the tools, they've got people that will use those tools, and the tar kettle saves us money. It's absolutely something that we need. There's a lot of information in there. I'm really happy with what we ended up with the CDBG money, and I really think that there's a lot of leeway to be made in that. We could get more if we can get this money spent. It seems like they're always coming back, and if you've got a project or something, they get the funds are in place. We just need to be able to utilize them. The last thing I'll talk about is the health department. I was in the office at about 7:15 this morning, and the telephone rang, and then it stopped ringing, and then it rang again, and I said, well, it's 7:15, I'll pick it up. So I picked up the phone, and sure enough, it was just a person calling in to tell somebody at City Hall how impressed they were with the health department and with the vaccination clinic, and the fact that they posted everywhere to get into a clinic, and Norwood was the only place that actually called them back, and that the person who called them back was a nice, friendly person, helped them get their stuff set up, got them they got to the vaccination clinic, everything went well. And they were just saying, that health department is really making the city of Norwood look good, because the people there are charming, friendly, the area was clean that they got their vaccination, and they really were happy to get it here. And I do feel like we're getting towards the end of that with the mass vaccination clinic that will be going on at the parking lot at Xavier. Hopefully in the next month or two, some of our Board of Health people can sort of step back a little. And I mean, they've been running on full runs, like the ever-ready bunny for it seems like months and months. It's time for them to get some relief, so I'll be glad when this stuff's all over with. So that's all I have. If you have some questions, I can take a question.
Mr. Tracy.
Through the chair to the mayor. Looking over some of these numbers, what was your initial projection for when you got rid of dispatch?
What was my initial projection?
On savings?
I think our personnel cost would go down to, I think the cost for Hamilton County Dispatch to do it is $110,000.
Okay.
Our projection is probably that we would cut the ask down in half.
I think you had a number of somewhere around 750,000, right? Okay.
Half of 1.2 million is what their ask was?
I'm finding in this FRP budget that 750,000 is now into E911 and Norcom, which basically took the place of dispatch, so.
$750,000 is in Norcom?
Between Norcom and E911, which puts us at no savings.
Oh, so 750, you're saying that adds up to 1.2 million?
Oh, Lord.
Okay.
The budget was 800,000,
or the 900,000.
Right? The budget was 800,000. This adds up to 738,000 between those two.
The request was never $800,000.
No, he's using 2021. We have some round closeout costs. Mr. Tracy, I'd suggest you use 2022 if you're going to want to compare ongoing costs.
I'm just saying that your numbers, again, like I had said earlier, were off, and you weren't going to save any money.
Okay, duly noted.
Anyone else? Any questions, comments for Mayor Schneider? Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Move on to item N, unfinished business. Any unfinished business? Mr. Thompson.
I'd like to request a committee of the whole meeting to go over the financial recovery plan sometime between now and the next regularly scheduled council meeting. Be awesome if we could invite the auditor to come to present it. I've always felt it's the most important thing that we do as council is going over this, and in years past things have been missed, and so I'd just like to have an opportunity to all go through it together and ask questions together and address any problems we might have.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? Any other? Mr. Bonson.
I agree with Mr. Thompson, so hopefully we can maybe try to get something on the books before we leave tonight for that. Did you want to do that now, or did you?
Well, I need to speak with Mr. Stith and see
when
he's in town.
That's about
This job takes him out of town.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
You don't have his calendar?
Please?
So you don't have his calendar?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did want to, we have a few exciting things going on. First off, the Norwood Cleanup Week is back, and unfortunately I don't have all the dates for it, but I do know the Montgomery Road Cleanup Day, that's going to be March 20th, so that's before our next council meeting. So March 20th, 2021, it's from 9 to 12. In years past, we've just met on the steps of City Hall. They do like a picture, so I'm sure that's where they're meeting again. But yeah, Montgomery Road cleanup, March 20th. So definitely come out. I think it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be good because we're going to get to see all these new projects going on.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo.
Yep.
Any other unfinished? You're fine. How about new business? Mr. Gabbard.
Just a couple, just to tag on his. The park cleanup that the mayor had alluded to will be on March 27th from 9 a.m. till noon. Hunter, Victory, Burwood, Marsh, Fenwick, Waterworks, Upper and Lower, Millcrest, and Northwood. So if you're available for those, March 27th from 9 a.m. till noon.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Yes, sir.
Wanted to just kind of let people know in general about our Rumpke set-outs. So you're not supposed to put your garbage cans out till like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock the night before your pickup. And then they need to be picked up the day of the pickup to bring your cans back in by the end of that day, by, before the next day. Too many places we see cans that are still out, 3 and 4 days later after pickup. The other thing is I'm starting to notice a lot of is people putting out, mattresses, box springs, couches, love seats. All those things can be put out, but they must be totally wrapped in plastic before Rumpke will pick it up. The other good thing that you should, the thing that you should do is probably give Rumpke a call to make sure that they have the appropriate truck to pick up whatever that item is. So if you got a large couch or something, the one guy picking up your garbage and your 2 garbage cans that you set out is probably not going to be able to get that. So just let them know. They're more than willing to do that. And then like any type of appliances, again, give them a call. Any refrigerators, you have to have the Freon removed from them. There has to be a sticker on there, the doors removed. So a lot of this sounds like, oh, that everybody should know that. Well, you're right, everybody should know it, but that's not what's happening. The number for Rumpke for their customer service is 1-800-828-8171. Once again, that's 1-800-828-8171. And one more, if I could, Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to just compliment the administration with this C-Click fix. We're getting, I signed up for it, and I'm seeing lots of people reporting, and lots of people are starting to use that. And I want to encourage more people to go download the app on your phone. You see a pothole, you see really anything. People are reporting more than just potholes. If they see things that are wrong, things that are out of order, that they're taking pictures and sending them. And I'm also seeing the responses that that Public Works or whoever sends out and lets the people know. So the program works, and that's what it's there for. It's for our people to see something out of place, see a pothole, let Public Works know.
Take a picture.
Take a picture, and use the app, take a picture, send it in, C-Click Fix. Go to that and check that out. And then one final thing, I think we're having a dumping problem at the Perry site. At the docks, right now there's at least a mattress, some other furniture stuff. Looks like it's just dumped. And so we might want to If you recall, Mr. Mayor, the one day that you and I and Mr. President went to prior to us taking office about the different things the county offers. One of those was the program where they'll go if you're having a problem with illegal dumping, that officer will come out and put cameras up and catch these folks. So if that, if we get that cleaned up and then we notice it happen again, that might be something we want to look into. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Anyone else? Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I do want to commend our Norwood Health Department for the number of vaccinations that they've given. The number that we got today was an estimate, but they think it's about 4,600 total doses. However, there's still, a lot of people are still having trouble getting appointments. And so I just wanted to let people know about this website called, I think it's AmorVax, so AMORVAX.com. But essentially, I think all of the City of Cincinnati and Hamilton County Public Health vaccine sites or vaccine locations, they're all kind of on that site. So if you sign up for that, and you have to, before you can actually see appointments, you actually have to give them a bunch of information, which it's unfortunate. But once you do, though, you're able to see that there's a whole bunch. A lot of times, there's appointments the next day. So if you know people that want to get appointments and they've had trouble, tell them to go. It's AMORVAX.com, like AmorVax, and they really try to get you to go to their website to download the app, but you don't have to. If you go to login at the top and then click patient login, it'll take you to a screen where you can do everything on the website. So definitely do that. I think it's important. And then once you do get your vaccine, it's very important to call the health department back if you're on the list to let them know, hey, I did get the vaccine with Hamilton County Public Health. You don't need to include me anymore. And that way they're not calling you trying to get you to come in whenever they have their vaccine available. So again, AMORVAX.com, highly recommend it. Everybody check it out.
Thank you, Mr. Bonzo.
Yep.
Mr. Tracy.
Through the chair to the mayor. I'd like to have the mayor look into getting Norwood signed up for Nixle.com. It's an emergency notification app for the residents that they can sign up for and get notified of emergencies. I can tell you I was probably the last person to know anything about the last shooting that we had here a couple weeks ago. My parents told me about it.
What's the app again? Can you?
Nixle, Nixle.
Okay.
And then, the fire as well, because I know it shut down. It had to have shut down, at least Sherman. So, I know it was probably 3 a.m., so not much traffic. But things like that we're going to have to shut down major arteries within the city or major events happen in the city. I'd like the residents to get notified.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. Anyone else? Thank you. We'll move on to communications. Item P1, Mayor Schneider, regarding mayor court fines. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated March 3rd, 2021, addressed to Mr. Ken Miracle, President and members of Norwood City Council, regarding mayor court fines. Dear President and members of council, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of February 2021. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. May I have a motion to receive and file? Mr. Braden?
Motion to receive and file.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Thompson?
Second.
Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, motion passes. Item P2, Auditor Jim Stith regarding the January monthly financial reports. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated March 3rd, 2021, Norwood City Council. Dear council members, this letter is to let you know that the January financial reports, monthly financial reports, were emailed to each council member on March 3rd. If you have not received said email, please let me know so that I can verify your email address and get you a copy of the reports. Sincerely, Kelly Brown, Account Clerk, Auditor's Office.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. May I have a motion to receive and file? Mr. DiNardo.
Yes, please. Receive and
Motion by Mr. DiNardo. Receive and file. Mr. Thompson. Second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, motion passes. Moving on to item R, adjournment. May I have a motion for adjournment? Mr. Gabbard.
Actually, we had an email that came about the liquor license. Aren't those usually in our packet? It came out,
You are right. However,
Yesterday.
the assistant to the clerk sent an email out to all of the department heads to see if they had any issues, like, police, fire, health department, and a couple other agencies, to see if they had any issues with it or if they had any objections. I think she was waiting to get all of those responses back before giving it to council. One of the previous conversations we had about those letters was just to find out what these, other departments thought before bringing it to council to get the final approval.
so that'll be on next council?
It should be.
All right.
May I have a motion for adjournment? Mr. DiNardo.
Yes, please.
Motion by Mr. DiNardo. May I have a second? Mr. Thompson.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. We are adjourned.